Ladies and gentlemen, I think we ought to start this meeting. I'm sorry to be a little late. We had another meeting downstairs, and we just finished. My apologies. It's Thursday, March 21st, and this is the Brookline School Committee. And I wanted to make a comment about the absence of two of our colleagues tonight, which are unavoidable, both Henry Warren and Ben Chang, who frankly would have preferred to have been here, but they cannot be. And so, having done that, I'd like to bring your attention to the calendar to begin with, and there's lots of information on the calendar. Thank you, Ms. Coyne. There are some new things on it. One is we have all the B-Space meetings shown, and all of the strategic planning and the superintendent forum dates that are still in the future. In addition, something not on the calendar, which Ms. Ditkoff alerted us all to last week, and I'll just repeat, please note that the Brookline Education Foundation is doing a trivia bee at 7 p.m. on tomorrow, right? And we do have a school committee team, but people should know that we have some outside ringers on that team as well. So we're looking forward to doing very, very well. Thank you for all of you who are participating, and thank you, our ringers, who will remain unidentified as of now. Are there any other questions or comments in connection with the calendar? Hearing and seeing none, I will proceed to the consent agenda. Colleagues, please note that the record of March 14th will be on our next meeting. So do I hear a motion for the consent agenda? Ms. Stone, thank you very much. Would anyone like to second that? Thank you, Ms. Cox, very much. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes clearly have it. Thank you very much. And we can go on to subcommittee reports. Ms. Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Subcommittee has not met since our last full school committee meeting, and our next meeting will be Monday, April 1st.
Very good. That's clear. Thank you very much. Ms. Charlupski, capital improvements.
You got to me too quickly.
Shall I come back to you? Absolutely.
Because then I can be better prepared.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Scotto, curriculum, please.
Yes, we had a curriculum meeting tonight. We met with Jennifer Flewelling, the principal of Devotion School. We meet regularly with the principals of the different schools over the course of the year to talk about things having to do with their school improvement plan. And tonight we were looking at some of the initiatives around literacy that were taking place at Devotion. So we had a lively meeting. The curriculum committee will meet again on April 2nd at 10:30 in the morning in probably the 5th floor conference room, and we're still working on the agenda. So I can't tell you what it is, but we will be meeting. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Scotto. Ms. Charlupski, want me to go to another?
Yes, because I can't seem to find the one email with the picture.
That's fine. Ms. Stone, government relations.
With apologies to Ms. Charlupski, government relations has nothing to report.
And then negotiations.
They have nothing to report either.
Okay. On negotiations, I think it's fair to say that nothing has happened. Is that correct? That's what Dr. Warren shared with me.
All right.
Ms. Charlupski.
Yes, I'd be happy.
Capital improvements, please. Thank you.
The reason I was sort of holding it up is because I was trying to find a picture of what it is that I would like to ask the school committee to approve. We've very graciously had a donation of a sculpture to the Heath School, which we discussed at the the Capital Subcommittee meeting, and I would like to bring it to a vote for acceptance of this very generous gift. And what I was hoping is I would have the name of the person who is giving it. They're moving out of town. They were Heath School parents. And Mr. Rowe's not here either to help me out on this. But at the next meeting, I will definitely have the name and the picture. I pulled up the email, but for some reason the picture doesn't come out. It's a very attractive, modern sort of sculpture that they plan to place in the courtyard, I think by the cafeteria there at the Heath School.
And the Heath School is enthusiastic about it?
Very enthusiastic. Yes, please.
Since we aren't able to look at the picture, we did look at it at the Capital Subcommittee. This is really, truly a beautiful sculpture, modern sculpture, and it's quite clear from talking through the plans for it that this will come at no expense to the school system. For moving it, it's going to be entirely covered by either existing staff that would move it anyway. Anyway, it's not. There's no expense to us. It's a beautiful structure, and they're thrilled to accept it. So I would join Ms. Charlupski in saying that we should be thrilled to accept this gift.
And do you need a vote?
Yes, please.
We do. Okay.
And I will move it.
Okay, we
move to accept
have a
this.
motion relying on Ms. Charlupski and Ms. Stone's aesthetic judgment.
No, and the rest, I think, the rest
And I was there too, but I wouldn't rely on me for that by any shape of the imagination. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? I do want to say that I'm very relieved because I signed a thank you note along with the principal of Heath earlier this week. So you're very kind.
That was
precipitous, Mr.
yes.
I don't know whether she mailed it.
Also, I think that's all because we did have a very lengthy capital improvements report. We are planning on having a devotion school building committee meeting. That's in the works, and it should be happening fairly soon. And that will catch everybody up on what's happening with that. We hopefully will be going out for an architectural firm quite soon. So
Great.
that's all, unless somebody else on the capital subcommittee has anything else to add. No? Thank you.
No questions for Ms. Charlupski. Okay. Ms. Stone, policy review?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have nothing to do at full committee tonight for policy review. Our next policy review subcommittee meets on April 24th.
April 24th, okay. Very good. That brings us to any additional liaisons. Ms. Cox, I believe you have a report.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee met in early March and made its recommendations for apportioning the grant the town receives from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We had $1,234,817 to apportion, with a 20% cap on program management and planning and a 15% cap on public services. Program management grants came in at their cap, and the committee recommended level funding for the public service applications to meet the cap on that category. The committee recommended funding for the renovation project of the senior center and prorated requests in housing at 60%. Some of the organizations receiving funding whose work intersects with the school department include the Brookline Center's Adolescent Outreach Program, Comprehensive Services for Children and Families, Next Steps, the Parent-Child Home Program, the Brookline Learning Project, and the Youth Employment Training Program. And I believe those recommendations will go to the Board of Selectmen.
Questions for Ms. Cox? Ms. Cox, was that a reduction in the allocation to Brookline from last year? Do you know?
I believe it was.
Okay. Thank you. Any other Ms. Ditkoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Strategic Plan Committee continues apace. There were lots of activity, one of which you witnessed here was the presentation of Professor Chris Avery. He was then on the front page of the Wall Street Journal the next day, which was the New York Times, thank you, the next day for his work on how the what he calls the undermatched phenomenon, which is where low-income students are not being challenged, for lack of a better word, at the right college levels. So it was exciting to see his work be highlighted so prominently by David Leonard, and we were there 24 hours before the New York Times. So it was exciting to see a sneak preview of Chris's work. I should also say that there are a number of other expert interviews that we've been doing. Dr. Fisher-Mueller and I have been talking to a number of folks. So some of you know Jordan Moranis, who is a Heath parent and also was the head of the Education Technology portfolio at the New Schools Venture Fund, which is a national fund that focuses on education initiatives. And he introduced us to a pretty amazing series of people. So we spoke with Maura Siegel, who's the head of the Achievement Network, and learned about her model. We spoke with Joel Rose, who's the head of New Classrooms. Joel's, you might know New Classrooms as School of One, which was part of the Department of Education in New York. Really, really interesting and exciting models for us to learn from and think about here. So we're learning from experts. We have two more experts here tonight, whom I'll introduce in a little bit. We've had our first parent forum, and we will have two more, and those are all posted. We will be starting the process in the next couple months of reaching out to the district administration, so the leadership team, principals, and coordinators. So all that is underway. Dr. Fisher-Mueller is leading that. And the planning group continues to meet and revise the 4 goals and think about the priorities underneath those goals. And we, I think, will be talking about this.
Yes,
so
please.
One of the questions that I've gotten from the committee is, when will we be talking about it as a committee? And the answer to that is April 4th.
Which is our workshop.
Our
And we
workshop.
thought we haven't had a chance to talk to you about that, but we thought that it would be a good time.
So what I promise you will not receive is a completed strategic plan by that point or anything like it, but we're certainly happy to walk through the goals with you and update you on the logic to date and hear your thoughts. So that's the update for the strategic plan meeting.
Thank you very much. And I can say, like many others have, that for the B-Space Committee, there has not been a meeting since our last meeting, but there is one coming up on Wednesday, I believe. There are no other liaisons. We can then go to public comment. Ms. Coyne, are there people who wish to speak? There are no people who wish to speak. We are going to have another public comment period a little bit later, which some of you may know about. I'm sorry, public hearing, you're correct. So we will go on to, yes.
Just want to clarify, there's probably a number of us that do want to comment on certain things, but they all pertain to the budget.
Right.
Yes, and that's what the budget hearing is for. And so we're going to wait and have all of those together. Okay? Good. Thank you. Well, let's see. Our student representative is not here. That's true. That's true. So let's go to the superintendent's report.
And I'm probably not going to help with that. So you do not have a written report. I'll ask your forgiveness for that this week. I do have a couple things that I want to make sure I highlight, and then one other around school calendar, collaborative time. The first is around educator evaluation. Dr. Boucher, Dr. Allen, and I attended a session today sponsored by the Superintendent's Association for districts that are not Race to the Top districts. That is, districts that are responsible for implementing next year. And Carla Baer was running that particular session. It was a good session. The main issue that we're going to struggle with, in addition to everything else that we need to put into place for next year, starting with the collective bargaining language around this issue, is that of district-determined measures. The commissioner has issued an advisory on district-determined measures, which you will remember is the aspect of this plan that talks about assessments or other kinds of measures used at the district level that are part of the educator evaluation system. The commissioner has directed districts to have a plan in September of 14, or excuse me, September of 13. The plan is to address measures that the district already has in place that it will utilize as part of the system, measures that the district is piloting and may use as part of the system, and areas where we have yet to figure out what we may use. Obviously, the majority of our discussions are going to fall in that third category, so it's not going to be a really large plan that we'll submit in September. But beginning implementation, and remember that in the regulations, the state directs that the district can use whatever period of time, these measures over whatever period of time they would like. The minimum number is 2 years, so you can't make judgments, and I use that word really loosely, without 2 years of data around assessment X. Most districts seem to be using at least, well, not at least, most districts seem to be using 3 as the number of years of some form of data. So we're going to have to wrestle with that quicker than we thought. And there are a number of districts that have expressed their concern to the commissioner about that timeline, and we have joined in that concern. The second issue that I wanted to report on is the Collaborative Commission. Since we have an audience, let me just mention that this is a group looking at the collaboratives that exist to provide service to school districts throughout the Commonwealth. The collaborative that we belong to is the EdCo collaborative. There are many of these organizations. Some districts belong to any number of them, and for some reasons that I'll leave to the reading of people who are interested, there was a new legislation formed around collaboratives, and this commission, which I happen to be a member of, was charged with coming up with recommendations around a number of areas of implementation of that law, of that legislation. Our final report is due in May, and the main issues seem to continue to be adult services. The issue there being that there are a number of collaboratives, including EdCo, that do provide some services for individuals above the age of 22, and that these service organizations appear at their inception to have been charged only with school-age children. So the question is, can these organizations that presently provide those services continue to, and can other collaboratives? So that's one question we're still struggling with. And the second is around the idea of consolidation, which I happen to be on that subcommittee, which really is part and parcel of the issue of the relationships that collaboratives will then have with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That is, there are some states where these educational service organizations are arms of the Department of Education. That's not been the case in Massachusetts. And do we want there to be some better relationship around providing professional learning in areas like educator evaluation, retail, those kinds of things? And if we do, what does that structure need to look like in order for that to happen? The MOAC, which is the sort of the MASS of collaboratives, their professional organization, has made some recommendations about this issue, which our particular subcommittee think makes sense. They are essentially that collaboratives would be grouped into regions, and they could help provide those services, designate the collaborative within that region that might provide those services. There's a lot more to the recommendation than that, but it seems to make sense. We have had some collaboratives during all these discussions express interest in merging. An interesting part of our consolidation discussion has been that the current legislation actually doesn't allow collaboratives to merge. it says that one has to go out of business for those school districts to then move into another. So one recommendation that we know we're going to make is that the legislation actually be put in place so if collaboratives would like to merge, they would have that opportunity to, because there are some that have run into a problem. So it's largely on those levels. At the last meeting, we heard from the Secretary of Education around his view on these issues. Remember, he comes from a district that did not belong to a collaborative. They're large enough that they were able to provide some of their own service. Interestingly enough, though, they did sell seats, if you will, to districts around them in a number of their special education programs. So I would argue they were, in fact, their own collaborative. So we heard from him, and we also heard from a gentleman from the national organization. There's actually a national organization of these educational service agencies, and he was able to provide some clarification as to the explanations we've received in the past about what is actually going on in Connecticut and some other states in terms of their system. Connecticut has a very centralized 6 collaborative system. They're essentially mini state agencies, or at least that's what we were told. They don't seem to be as much of a state agency as we had originally been counseled. So it was a really great conversation. We have, I think, 3 or 4 meetings left. Reports expected in May. The chair has filed, which I understand is the norm. Those of you that function in legislation know this better than I. The chair has actually sort of filed placeholder legislation for whatever it is that we come up with, so that language can be substituted and be part of what I think will be a hearing in May. That's my report. Thanks.
Yes, Ms. Charlupski.
I'd like to just add something in terms of EdCo, that there is now a draft agreement that EdCo has put together, and we have to put together a new agreement since the first one was 35 years ago and it hasn't been updated, and it's a requirement of the legislation. So once that gets approved, Bill and we'll be bringing it here to the committee for our approval and it basically lays out what we're doing now anyway. So I don't think it should be very complicated.
Other questions for Dr. Lapini? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Lapini, would you like to speak to the school calendar?
No.
No? Okay. Shall we move on then?
Sure. No. We asked if I'd like to. You
I
asked
did.
me if I would.
You're absolutely correct.
So I don't have anything to report on collaborative time this evening, but that's not to suggest that there aren't good discussions going on around this issue. I would say around the issue of the 2013-2014 school calendar and what the collaborative time structure may look like within that calendar. What I have communicated to the union president and what we continue to work toward is that we will have a complete calendar, whatever that is to look like, by the time we come here on April 11th for our meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're missing our student representative, so I have to pass that agenda. And it's not fair to ask the Brookline Teen Center to go 30 minutes ahead of time, unless Paul Epstein is here, which I doubt. I haven't seen him. No, it's Matt Cooney is ill, and so in fact, surprising as it is Paul. Yes. That's okay. So from a point of view of handling a hearing, let me ask. Oh yeah, that would be good. I didn't know that. Great.
So we are saved by one of our guests. So I need to tell you a couple things. First and foremost, we are delighted to continue with our Brookline Education Learning Series this evening. Stieg was a former professor at the Harvard Business School, so it's only fitting that we cold call him in a sense, because he was expecting to go after Vanessa. They were going to do a bit of a 1-2 punch, and he was going to, in part, get the chance to think while she was speaking and tailor his remarks to hers, and so unfortunately it is a cold call. So let me introduce Stieg. So Stieg is the CEO of Match Charter Schools right here in our backyard. Certainly there are wildly different opinions about charter schools in this community, but I think everyone will be shortly energized by your passion and commitment and your experience. Before becoming the CEO of Match, Stieg was the founder and managing partner of the Newark Charter School Fund, which was an operating foundation in the first term of Mayor Cory Booker that focused on education reform in the Newark area. He was also a full-time lecturer at the Harvard Business School for 4 years, focused on teaching and research in entrepreneurship and education. Before that, he had a wildly successful career as a tech CEO, and is completely overeducated in every way, if you care to Google all of his various advanced degrees. But anyway, we are delighted to have you here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for allowing the cold call. I apologize, and I have no doubt that it will be terrific. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, well, thank you. It's nice to be here. I've never been to a school committee meeting in Brookline before. So first of all, my wife Sherry and I have 3 kids, Maya, Hope, and Anna, who go to Runkle, and we came to Brookline 6 years ago, like the hordes arriving on your shores now to send our kids to school here. And since I'm a little caught off guard, I'm going to start with a joke. This is for you, Bill. So I was walking my youngest to school this morning. This is Anna. She's 6. Jen knows her. And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, you know, I work in schools mostly." And then she said, "Daddy, who are you the boss of?" And not sure what to say, I answered with a question. I said, "What do you mean by that, Anna?" And she said, "Well, at Runkle, Dad, the teachers are the bosses of the kids. And Dr. Boucher is the boss of the teachers, and Mr. Zucchini is the boss of Dr. Boucher." So, honest to God, it happened this morning at 7:30 on Buckminster Road. So, I'm not sure what Ms. Madden's teaching my 6-year-old, but all right. So yes, I work at Match Education, and we. So I work at Match Education, and as Susan mentioned, we run some charter schools in Boston for low-income students. We also train teachers. That's basically our work. And my job today is to take you to a very technical body of research and applied work, which is referred to generally as non-cognitive factors in kids. And to do that, let me first of all try to just locate this body of thought and work in a broader picture of how we think about schools. So up on the wall, you'll see a very brief slide on how we think about our job. We run schools, and we are ultimately interested in producing in our high school students 2 variables. The first one is academic readiness. By that, I mean exactly what you likely think it means, which is mastery of math and English, measured initially on MCAS tests and eventually on AP exams, so that our students are genuinely prepared for college-level academics. This has been the mainstay of our work for a decade. And it is the work we do in running long school days, in trying to teach and tutor cleverly, build very strong relationship with students, to produce straight-ahead academic readiness in our students. That's half our goal. The other half is to create students who are effortful. I'll come back to that in a second, because that's where we're going to go. The presence of those 2 variables in students, we think, will cause them to thrive in college and ultimately get on to jobs and livelihoods, which is our goal. It turns out that we think, and the research shows, that it's equally important for students to be academically ready as it is for them to be effortful. I'll talk more about this in a minute, but if you could wish anything for almost any student, including the ones we teach who are university low-income students, you'd want them simply to be hardworking. If that happens, there's very good reason to be optimistic that despite the consequences of poverty or intelligence, they're going to do well. And thus, the real question we struggle with, which is how do you think about effortful 18 and 19-year-olds? What lies anterior in their psychology to a propensity, which they eventually have to exercise autonomously, to work hard? That's the puzzle, and this is where the social science of non-cognitive factors enters the stage. Okay, so that's the big picture. Hold on. No, this is the only button I have to push. In the next half hour, I can do it. There we go. Okay. All right. So, this is a great slide because none of you can read it. So, I don't. All right. I'm going to let you do that. Okay. So, this is, I'll talk you through this, folks, but this is a model that's been laid out by researchers at the University of Chicago about how this varied and complicated world of non-cognitive factors in students interact to produce effortful kids who perform. So let's read it from the bottom up. Academic performance, broadly defined as academic attainment and academic performance through four-year college. And again, remember the good news here, which is, and this truly is the best news in our field, I think, which is that where you have students who are effortful, thankfully, the presence of that attribute in them can overwhelm the otherwise very damaging effects of poverty on their prognosis, and also even variations in intelligence, quite likely. And by effort, I mean exactly what you think. It is literally an observable attribute in a student. Do they do homework? Do they pay attention in class? Do they arrive on school regularly and on time? So one thing we've done for a decade, since everything else I'm about to talk to you about is difficult and foggy, is to model effort, demand effort, and school design for effort. That's why we run long school days. And so an immediate outcome of this research is all schools should massively, or as much as they can, expand time over task among students in any way they can. Because effort, there is no way to get to academic performance but through hard work. There are no shortcuts. That actually explains a large majority of the trajectory of our school over a decade, and even the high-performing charter school movement in this country. We began and still are schools that work very, very hard. If we're nothing else, we have long days, deep relations with kids. But now we set up the question, which is, what causes a student, a human, to become effortful? There are 4 boxes up there. They summarize 30 years of research on this. Social skills, learning strategies, something called academic perseverance, and academic mindsets. I'm going to pull out 2 variables in this non-cognitive world that we think are most interesting and promising. One is something you're likely to have heard about called growth mindset in students. It's actually listed up here in the red box as the second thing down. It's a mindset that might or might not be present in a student that says, my ability and competence grow with my effort. This is likely, we think, one of the most causal variables in the psychology of effort. And it's the view or the mindset in a student that when adversity arrives, effort is called for, as opposed to the view in students that when failure or adversity arrives, it's evidence of innate inadequacy. Everyone in this room should relate to this individually and as parents. So we can probably all do better at this, which is to respond to some failure with the view that if I try harder, eventually I'll get better at it. This is incredibly causal, it seems, in students. It's related, the social scientists believe, to basic attributions about competence, intelligence, and fundamentally optimism. The idea that if you pay the price now, you'll be rewarded later. There are fascinating social science experiments out there about this. I'll just tell you a couple of them. It turns out when they study, these happen to be low-income students who go to college, and they expose them to upperclassmen in randomized groups who talk about their experience in college, and vary the treatment group only by one small way, which is that the upperclassmen say at some stage freshman year, I struggled and I studied harder and my GPA improved. The mere presence of that in a treatment group during a transitional period, essentially freshman year, can have provable effects on persistent rates and GPAs in college because it cues the student to process adversity as a natural element of college and something to which they would rationally respond with through effort. There's another fascinating experiment where students in randomized groups in science class are given curriculum, but the treatment group is taught that the brain gets better with practice. It's sort of slipped into the curriculum. GPAs rise materially because suddenly students are literally cued on the idea that effort, in this case academic study, produces results. So that's to pull out one of these non-cognitive factors on the map up there that we find interesting. And as I'll talk to in a minute, this is one that's quite likely malleable and one that's most likely to be receptive to programming in schools. The middle box is academic perseverance. You guys are likely to have read about this. You can barely open the New York Times or turn on NPR now without someone talking about grit. Or Paul Tuff just wrote a book that's on a bestseller about this phenomenon. But, and all these words, by the way, tend to run together. There's a lot of confusion in the jargon, but it's the basic idea, or the basic idea is that some students do and some students don't have, by default, a tendency to persist cognitively and behaviorally when the work is unpleasant, when there's a high level of challenge, or where there's a high level of distraction. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's tenacity. Now, there's a lot of ambiguity in the research about whether this isn't, in fact, one of very closely related to conscientiousness, which is quite likely one of the universal personality traits that are largely inborn or formed early in childhood, in which case it's not going to be very malleable. You guys might have heard of this famous marshmallow experiment, which has entered the popular lexicon. It was done about 30 years ago where they rolled up to kids like Anna, and they, at the Stanford preschool, this is in 1983, I think, and they put a marshmallow in front of a bunch of these kids and told them that if you didn't eat the marshmallow and waited 5 minutes or something like that, you get 2 marshmallows. And some ate the marshmallow and some didn't. Well, the ones who didn't did much better on SATs 15 years later. And these are economists talking. This is no joke. So it turns out that self-regulation, impulse control, self-control is highly predictive. By the way, it's not clear what actually really is going on. The presence of that ability to self-control might have been inborn. We're not sure. It may actually have been present in some students because of variations in intelligence. It's possible that people with higher intelligence are more able to self-regulate and show self-control. We don't know. But what is sure is where kids, humans, can self-regulate and persist, they work harder. So I want to stop there. This could go on and on, folks. I passed something out to the school committee, which I recommend to anyone reading here. It was a literature review done of this field only a few months back by the University of Chicago, and it's an extraordinary piece of writing in 20 pages that summarizes all this work from decades, and it's very measured, which is important because this field has now taken on a certain kind of flavor of exuberance, I think. So here are the hard things for practitioners like the Brookline School Committee and our schools and the schools in Brookline, which is the following. There's very little empirical work that's been done yet on the obvious questions here. Which of these non-cognitive factors matter most? Very hard to know to the production of effort in students. Our ability to measure these factors is still pretty early. I'll come back to that in a second. And lastly, most importantly, if these factors are observable and measurable, if they're malleable, and if we can hypothesize which really matter, how would we program against them? Literally, what are Bill and Jennifer and our principals to do in schools every day to drive, pick anything on the list? So for example, right now you'll see in a lot of schools overt programming around grit and tenacity. I'm slightly embarrassed to say this, we do this. We have signage on the walls that say don't eat the marshmallow. KIP kids, by the way, these are some high-performing Charlupski countries, they literally have T-shirts on them that say this, and they have assemblies about human beings who are tenacious and have come from nothing and done well. I'm pretty sure it's not going to matter. What I think causes people to be perseverant, if you can influence it at all, is probably much deeper trials, much more profound human experiences. Our hypothesis is that if we're to cause kids to acquire the mindset we think matters, which is the growth mindset, and if we are able to influence them to be more tenacious, it's going to be through very, very strenuous academic work, which we ask them to consider, which we ask them to begin work on, which initially they can't master, but with enormous help, which they eventually learn to master. And then one day, when they're 16 or 17, they can compute the area under curve, and we think that's when something happens to them. They can read a complicated history text, they can read a complicated biology text, and all of a sudden, this very progressive, child-centered thing has happened, their mindsets have evolved, they have experienced perseverance and might likely persist with it. But the big question for us as practitioners is, which of these factors matter? Can we actually survey them in kids? And can we then, over the next decade, really do grainy applied research out there in the field to figure out how to program against them? We're working right now with the very same researchers who wrote this piece of work to try to field a comprehensive survey that can detect changes, the presence, first of all, and over time, changes in perseverance, the growth mindset, some of these other mindsets that matter a great deal, beginning with our students in 5th or 6th grade. On that base of measurement, we will have some ability over the next 5 or 6 years to detect where we might or might not be influencing these patterns. My big worry about this field is that it can defend or rationalize almost any intervention in a school. Bill, you're not going to have an educator walk in here in the next, or a parent walk in here in the next 5 years and say, have a great idea for the Brookline schools, and they're not going to help with academic behaviors of the non-cognitive mindsets. That's definitely not something that I'm for. Everybody's for this stuff. Everybody wants gritty kids who have social skills, who have learning strategies, but how we produce them in the kids is a totally different matter. And so I fear that we'll be standing here 6, 7 years from now, and we won't actually have made any progress on what the hard-nosed interventions are that drive these attributes in kids and how to program against them in schools. So I'm going to stop there. If you don't ask me questions, I'm going to tell more jokes. But I welcome any questions about this work.
I'm worried that we're going to be more interested in the jokes. No, that's not true. Ms. Kershaw, please.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Last time we saw each other was the halls of high school.
Yes.
We went to high school together. He's behind me, though.
Oh, my goodness. Whoa, I thought you meant, you're that Amy Kershaw?
I am.
This was New Jersey in 1987.
Exactly,
Okay.
and I was
So
in
we'll
his
catch
older
up
brother's
afterwards,
class.
Amy.
I'm sorry. Oh, now I'm going to forget my question.
Yes, wow, me too. The answer, I don't know. All right.
So I have two
Nice to
questions.
see you
Nice
again,
to see
yeah.
you too, and thank you. I know this was completely fascinating, and I think very thought-provoking for how we think about our curriculum development. So I have two questions. One is about the relationship between grit or tenacity in other areas, like sports or music or other areas, and how either you see that relating or you see that as a window into developing those skills that can be used in academic settings.
It's a great question. So I think the plain answer is I don't know whether through extracurriculars you can influence perseverance for the reasons I just described. Number one. Number two, it breaks our heart to be that skeptical about it. I'll tell you why. We have at our high school a basketball team. And we watch every day the boys at our high school, who are the hardest students we have to educate, eagerly do 3 or 4 hours of algebra, geometry, or calculus in order to qualify for the basketball basketball team, and then we actually win our goofy little basketball league, and they feel great. And we want to believe that this is more than what it might be, unfortunately, which is a utility optimization by these boys to sort of get to play sports and be popular, and therefore trade in work for that. We want to believe it's something deeper in them, that actually we're generating in them the stuff you see up here, a different kind of mindsets, these new identities and perseverance. We don't know, honestly. Period. We have enormous resource allocation problems around. We literally have meetings, and we say we know that the thing we have to produce in kids is effort. Honestly, if we could have one thing in a high school graduating senior, it's not a 4 in AP calculus exam. It's a 2, but a kid we know is going to try very hard. We want that kid. And how do we spend money against this? Is it student council? Is it sports? Is it drama? Is it longer days? What we tend to do in the absence of clarity is fall back on more, double down on core academic readiness. Because our default will be that if we teach a lot of biology and a lot of history and a lot of AP literature and a lot of AP calculus, we get a double payback. We know we prepare them academically because the biggest thing we observe in college is they have to do 2 or 3 hours of sustained quiet reading of dense nonfiction text. If they can't do that, they've got a problem. So we know we've got this mountain to climb with them to get them ready academically for college. You know, our 9th graders arrive reading at a 6th grade level, and the middle schoolers come in at a 3rd or 4th grade level. We have preschoolers now in who are already a year behind, and many of whom don't speak English. So there's an enormous challenge for us straight ahead on the first goal I put up on the first slide. Our sort of prevailing view then will be, therefore, the thing we can provide them where they will evolve non-cognitively is also likely the academics, because it's so intense, so legitimate, it's so earnest, it's so daily, it's so constant. And so that's probably where we'll stay, is where we'll spend money and time until we begin to untangle this and know for sure where we can drive, or if we can drive, the perseverance qualities up there and those mindsets, particularly the growth mindset. Incidentally, the growth mindset, the reason they think it's the most important of the 4 is that it's probably the one that migrates from setting to setting. So it's very important for kids they know to have all of those mindsets when they're in school at Runkle in 5th grade. But the growth mindset is the one that's universal. It will matter to us today. It will matter to them forever. So that's my answer.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
You actually foreshadowed my second question, which was about gender differences,
Yeah.
and how you've seen that either in the research or in your practice relative to boys and girls.
Right. Yep. I don't think I have full mastery of this. There's very subtle research that goes on even in this non-cognitive world about how these dynamics and these attributes vary across all kinds of basically demographic variables, poverty, gender, and so on. And we could talk more about what we see in our schools between boys and girls, but it's probably what you would predict and intuit. It's harder to educate boys for us.
Ms. Charlupski.
I think this is actually very fascinating. Thank you for your presentation. One thing I don't see up there is parental expectations and how that plays into a child's tenacity or ability to continue at whatever it is that the point you want them to get to.
Yeah. The most important thing for these kids are effective adult relationships in the home. So ignoring everything I've told you, there's undeniable research that 75% of the causality for young people are home variables of some kind, rather than school variables and rather than community variables. So there are a lot of kids in Brookline who don't need to go to school. 75% of the problem solved. They've been turn the lights off, Bill. They've been read to, they've been loved, they've been fed. You got it. So now, just to be clear, it's not at all obvious what it is in the home that's so powerful. They can identify the proxies, number of kids in the number of books in the home. Did the adult, biologically related or not, go to college? Those are the proxies. 15% of the causality are narrow school variables: money spent, class size, curriculum, and then the residual community variables: poverty, crime, things like that, health rather, nutrition. So that's a truism. great schools, ours, I think, resemble more families than we do schools on most days. This work is not native to schooling. What we're doing here is not per se about educating a kid. We're trying to produce in a child a psychology that actually will sustain them, and it comes down to effort. So, so with that generality, by the way, it explains a lot of what we intuitively do at schools. We call parents 3 times a week, no matter what. We school the kids from 7:30 to 5 a day, and sometimes that's a magical relationship with parents, and sometimes it's to compensate for what's going on at home and in the communities, right? So much of this is really actually parenting, mentoring, coaching, influencing, but it's not, narrowly speaking, schoolwork. Though, by the way, if we're going to do this well, how we organize classrooms, those settings, those contexts, the signaling, and so on, can have enormous impacts on mindsets and set kids up, because learning strategies and so all this stuff is produced in schools. But our jargon for it is half of what we do is educate kids, the other half of what we do is change kids. So that's a long way of saying that this is essentially parenting. Now, we do everything we can every day to enroll parents, engage parents, and unfortunately sometimes compensate from the absence of parenting variables and home variables in these kids' lives.
Ms. Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, like everybody else. This is very interesting work, and I either read something about similar research or we heard it recently, and I just wanted to raise it and ask if you'd heard of this. So one of the things we heard from one of our principals recently at the Lawrence School is that they're working with a framework called Habits of Mind, which actually tracks very closely to this layout here, and they have started organizing. We were listening, like we did tonight, talking to the principal about a school improvement plan, and they clearly have set their sights on organizing a lot of their teamwork in the classroom and with the kids around reinforcing these habits of mind and really bringing kids back to it, starting with the pre-K or the kindergartens. And I wondered whether you all knew about that, whether that was something that you'd looked at, and how you see it as being similar to this.
Yeah, I'm not closely familiar with habits of mind. I've come across it, I believe, number one. So number two, my strong guess would be that it's an approach that traffics very directly in these academic mindsets up there, which are also where we think as practitioners, and I think there's some evidence in the research about this, where you're most likely to find influence. These are the ones that in the research are most likely to be malleable. They're the ones that can be most directly and effectively reflected in school routines and in classroom practices. Again, my caution, my worry is that all of this stuff sounds great. It's very hard to know what's really causal, is all I mean to say. But that's our problem. It's Brookline's problem. It's the whole field's problem. So we're about to get our college complete. We'll release our college completion numbers from going back about 12 years now. And they're pretty good. And we don't know why, if we're really candid. I mean, it's those two. What combination of academic readiness and this mindset work, or these non-confident work, really produce it? Was it the fact that our kids can't get in the building without shaking the hand of 5 adults who they basically don't love them, and who also demand a lot of them, and it's all over the walls, and we got them, and we're in deep relationship with them? How much of it is the parenting variable, and how much of it is straight ahead, clever, intense teaching and tutorial work, carefully aligned to the stuff they need to know how to do, measured very well, and very driven, done in a very driven way? It's just very hard to tease this stuff out. So what we end up doing in practice is falling back on pattern and judgment and all that stuff, which is best we can do. I think this gets really exciting if we can begin to survey these variables in kids and then do genuine applied and controlled research on it over time. But back to habits, it sounds wonderful stuff, and it's yeah.
Ms. Scotto.
I'm going to go back in time a little bit because I've been around a long time. I started teaching in Brookline in the 1980s, the early 1980s. And there was a very dynamic assistant superintendent, Louise Thompson, here. And I remember going to workshops where she talked about corporate culture, that in corporate culture they used slogans, they used all kinds of things to get the people in the company to buy into their view of the world and to really make them a member of the team. And she was talking about it in terms of creating classroom culture, which, in fact, when I look at this, a lot of it is about how you go about creating community and classroom culture. And it works. In fact, it's not a new idea at all, because if you go back to Confucius, Confucius talks about the need for people to develop Ren, which is humanity. The way you develop Ren is that you establish a certain culture of rituals. That is to say, there are you respect certain people based on their status. You are polite to people. There are certain things you do, even if they are not meaningful to you, you do them. And the theory is that if you do them consistently, eventually they will become part of you and you will develop this humanity. You will become a better person. So I think these ideas are not new, but I do think they're very powerful ones. And I think anybody who works in a classroom and works with kids over time will agree. And I think your comment about the fact that it resembles in a way what should happen in a healthy family is very important, because part of what people have to do is feel nurtured in order to grow. What happens, though, to the kids for whom this doesn't work? Now, at the match schools, you have children over long periods of time. You start fairly early in the morning. They go through the school day. You have them in the afternoon where they're working with the mentors. And I see this because I live about a block away from the one on Commonwealth Avenue.
Yeah.
But what happens when they go home and these ideas aren't reinforced? Yeah. What do we do? And this is in a sense a rhetorical question because I'm not sure we know. What do we do about the kids who don't develop, not Confucius's humanity, but this devotion to scholarship, this sense of feeling that they can do something? What has your experience been with that group of students?
Yeah. There's a lot there. I'm going to skip the Confucius part.
I taught sixth grade.
Okay.
We had a giant social studies unit.
So the first thing I'll say, just for the record, it's important to us, is people vastly underestimate the capacity of the families from which our kids come. That's the first thing I want to say. These people don't have a lot of money, but they're extraordinary parents, usually. So I want to resist the stereotype that these kids, even though they're poor and non-white, come from depleted homes. There's a lot there, but I think the first thing I want to say is incredible parents, and in many, many cases. Now, obviously, many of them aren't so lucky, and in any case come from violent neighborhoods, and they come from communities and a society at large that disadvantage them unjustly. Our response in our school is the following. We can't fix poverty. We can't fix racism. I can't fix the housing shortage. We can't fix pollution and malnutrition. We can't fix those things. All we can do is run a school. So we're going to run it, and we're going to run it all day, despite all that, to overcome it. So that's our reflex. That's our belief. And it turns out, lo and behold, if we can generate this effort, then we can overwhelm the effects of poverty and all the related disadvantages these kids have. That's basically our response. Now, there's some subtleties in it. And I think in that way, we resist any narrative that says schools can't overcome the achievement gap. I wish we could fix poverty and racism and all the stuff that originates these problems and deterioration in family homes. But since we can't, we just work on schools. Now, the way this plays out with kids is very important. They walk through the door, and the meta message to them from us is two things. One is, we love you. It's not said, it's acted on. We're there. And the second thing is very important is, if you are willing to be effortful, which you are capable of, this is going to work. And we actually don't talk to them explicitly about the situations from which they come. We empathize with it because we don't want to signal to them that we can actually cure the things that they're exposed to in their communities, because it would just make them anxious and they wouldn't believe us, and we can't. What we can do is tell them, if you work very hard, we can lead you to a place where you'll go to college. And we can promise them that. That settles them down. And then ultimately, the game becomes about effort. And here's the very important thing. If we have deep relationships with them, if they genuinely think we care about them, we actually initially can demand of them and get from them effort. And it buys us time. So it's a big part of what we do, Barbara. That's why these relationships are so vital to us. There's a saying on our wall that says the kids don't know how much you care, how much you know, until they know how much you care. So we produce these relationships with the students and their families, and this is most important, Barbara, where they come from home settings where they're not encouraged and supported properly, in part so we can demand effort of them and get them moving very quickly towards academic readiness.
Yeah, if I can just respond for 1 second. I don't think it's necessarily the poverty. I did not really mean to imply that.
Okay.
I think you can find the same situation in the Brookline schools from very affluent families where poverty is no issue, but the children are not being supported at home. I do think the advantage you have is that you have a longer school day.
Sure.
You have a lot of intense education going on, and we don't have that. I just think, and I think you're right, you can't overcome any of that. And there's also, it's very difficult to overcome a certain kind of apathy from a home, whatever their income status is, or a certain kind of an atmosphere where what you're trying to do in school is not being reinforced by the home and quite possibly might be undermined. And those are the kids, I think, ultimately, who we need to worry about, whatever their income status.
Absolutely.
Ms. Titkoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was terrific, and certainly resonates with a lot of ideas that we have here, certainly not making excuses for kids, but holding them to high expectations regardless of their starting point, and the dangers of misguided love, which says, oh, it'll be fine, we understand that you had a hard whatever, you don't have to achieve as high. So anyways, this a different way to think about the soft bigotry of low expectations. So we do talk about that here, and so it's really helpful to hear that reinforced. I do want to just ask the hard question about the assessing and measuring piece. I mean, so as you think about it, certainly there's no MCAS for non-cognitive skills, nor would one ever aspire to such a horrific thing. But I guess, how do you know it when you see it? How do you, I mean, what are ways that teachers, even if they're just filling out a checklist, even if the teachers are just filling out a checklist of these skills, I mean, how do you assess them? What do you look for?
Sure.
Because I think we are pretty interested in that as well. Not quantitative, but assess it at all.
Yeah. The short answer is, in certain pockets of this, the survey instruments are not there yet. So Duckworth has a grit scale out. Duckworth is one of the pioneering social science systems. There's a lot of work in that orange box. And she has, and there's a survey, a self-administered one, where you could go up and allegedly assess your own grit, tenacity, fill in whichever word you want. It's a relatively simplistic tool, we think. The central stack here, the perseverance up to the mindsets, is, I think, where a lot of the engineering has to be done, Susan, to create survey instruments in schools so that just practitioners can monitor this. Because the moment you can monitor it, you'll have naturally occurring experiments in schools where certain students are exposed to certain kinds of programming and other students not, and you'll be able to monitor variations in these things over time. The ability the social skills are actually easier to measure. They're psychographic assessments. I think the causality of the social skills is a little less obvious, by the way. So that's the short answer is a ton of work has to be done on it. I think it's where I would focus if I was Brookline on this, even as you act on it in practice, which is to try to implement surveys on this. So if you're serious about it over the next 4 or 5 years, be fast. It's cutting edge stuff. They'll be releasing one at the University of Chicago next fall. Gates has funded it, and it's decided to be integrated. They've gotten basically all the social scientists in a room, despite the obvious resistance of them to collaborate. This is Dweck and Duckworth, the whole crew, to come up with, actually Ron Ferguson at Harvard's very active in this world too, to come up with an instrument that can be widely fielded and where you can get data across schools on the presence or absence of these factors in kids.
Oh, Eddie had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Cox, I didn't see you. I apologize.
I hate to throw another variable at you. I attended, and my children attend the Brookline schools. I taught in the Chelsea High School, and so, which I think is probably somewhat equivalent to what you see in the match schools. And another variable that I see between those is maybe the heterogeneity of one type of classroom and the homogeneity of another, in the sense that in Chelsea, a lot of my students came from a similar socioeconomic condition, lived in the same neighborhood. In Brookline, we live in the same neighborhood, but come from vastly different socioeconomic places sometimes. And whether there's been any research into, can these sorts of exercises be done successfully in a heterogeneous classroom?
Oh, got it. I don't know for sure, Abby, but I should think so. This set of variables matters equally and is equally present in all kids, regardless of the variables that you describe. I think what I hear when you describe what you just did, where my brain goes is that you guys have a much harder job, generally speaking, given how beautifully diverse the students are in Brookline, than we do, actually. Right? Because, for example, there are a class of students in Brookline who look exactly like ours. We get to go to work every single day worrying about them specifically and their needs. First of all, on the academic readiness front, they tend to stack up at academic skill levels that are roughly comparable, so we can focus our curriculum, our assessments, all our work on their specific needs. We're much less varied academically, for one thing. So we can put enormous pressure on that particular set of goals for those kids. Plus, somebody mentioned briefly how small and flexible we are, so we can move. So I think that's the issue, which is the difficulty, frankly, in running schools for students who are as varied and diverse on almost every dimension as they are in Brookline. It's the beauty of this place. It also makes it very challenging to meet the needs of everybody, and I don't think it's any different here.
Steve, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So, continuing on our learning series, we have Vanessa Kirsch. So, Vanessa, I should tell you what we said to Stieg. So, originally you were going to go first, and Stieg was going to get to respond. So now you get to, having seen his. He went deep on Match's approach to the non-cognitive piece, and so you're going to give us more of the overview.
I see
so
that he did
it made more sense.
Presentation.
It was going to say, well, it made more sense to do it the other way, because you were going to give us the broad overview, and he was going to go deep. But anyway, it's great because you're going to pull us back up. So Vanessa Kirsch is the founder.
I'm not sure I can. Yeah, I'm going to attempt to try to introduce myself.
Can I introduce you?
Is there a technological person who could help me get these slides in here?
Peter probably can.
Thank you.
So Vanessa is the founder and managing director of New Profit, which is an investor, a venture philanthropy that it used to be called a venture philanthropy, it still is, that invests in a wide range of education and youth-related activities, which she'll tell you about in a moment. Vanessa has had a long and successful career. She was the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. She was a Forbes, one of 15 innovators who will reinvent the future. She was in the Boston Business Journal, 40 Under 40. I mean, the list goes on. I'm not going to read them all because it's too long. I will say before New Profit, she was also a founder of something called Public Allies, which, I don't know, am I allowed to say who your most famous employee was?
Yes.
Okay, so she was the founder of Public Allies, which is a nonprofit, and the most famous employee of which was one Michelle Obama in Chicago many, many years ago.
Yes,
I don't even
know. Hired Michelle Obama, and that was a good hire.
It was a good hire. She was
a tough employee.
She recently served, I don't know if you still do, on the Tufts Alumni Council. Are you still?
Yes.
Still on the Tufts Alumni Council. In Brookline, she's best known perhaps as the mom to Maribel and Reese and wife to Alan Casey, whom some of you know. However, her professional accomplishments are so outstanding that they overshine all of theirs. So anyway, we are delighted to have you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you all. And, you know, when Susan asked me, she said, oh, just come and share some ideas. And little did I know there would be a huge audience here. And really, I feel like this is a great opportunity to bring two worlds together, because we at New Profit are a foundation that supports great social innovators that are scaling across the country and helping to change the way education looks in America. But the question is, does it work? And you all are the main consumers of these things, and so I hope that in this maybe discussion, more dialogue discussion, I see myself as learning as much from you all as I can impart of what we're learning and experiencing on the philanthropic side. And I sort of want to take a note and just say, philanthropy presents an interesting opportunity, and especially at a time when every government budget is just under huge duress. And so philanthropists are trying to make up the difference and figure out how to invest in innovations that will land on your platforms, not to sound so impersonal, but at a time when maybe the resources aren't there to do it all through government. So it's a really, really important partnership, but oddly enough, not one that is, we don't sit at the table together that often. We don't, as philanthropists, say, what do you all need? And so I see this as an opportunity, and hopefully an ongoing opportunity, to think about that. New Profit has invested about $100 million in education reform, in organizations, probably some of which that you all have benefited from. We focus nationally, but are very interested in providing innovators with the opportunity to truly scale their organizations to communities that can't afford these innovations. And that really is communities across America, now more than ever, not just the poorest communities in America. I also just want to say, having read your strategic plan, it is you all and that brought us to Brookline, and the great leadership, and the sole reason we moved to Brookline was the great public schools here. So we have a BEEP kid, so not yet fully in the system, but about to be, and a fifth grader, and it's been a great experience, and we're really appreciative of that. So let's see. I did want to start with a word about, let me see if I can, sorry. Just want to oh, N. Perfect. I have to say a word about innovation, and one of my favorite people, Steve Jobs. I often come to meetings, that's okay, because that's, okay. I won't be using that one. Okay, great. I often talk in places where everybody's like, oh, why are we talking about innovation? We don't even have the money to do what we want to do. And I just think it's important to ground this in the ideas that innovation are not expensive. They're actually efforts to make things cheaper and more efficient. And so when you think about innovation, as Steve Jobs says, Apple was never spending nearly what IBM was spending, and it was innovating in a much greater way. So it's not a direct correlation. So I just want to start, because now I'm going to lay out all these great innovations, and you're all going to say, oh my gosh, but we could never afford them. That is not true. Innovation is not always expensive. So here's a story about New Profit. I started New Profit 15 years ago, and we have largely, over the last 15 years, focused on innovations in human capital development, raising academic standards, and K-12 support and enrichment. So those were where we go out. We've made 35 investments. These are just a few of them, but we make between $1 million and $3 million investments in organizations that we think are helping to bring on some of the newest and most important changes in education. So over the last 15 years, we feel really good about those investments we've made, helping to recruit and train principals all over America, helping to recruit and develop teachers, working with charter schools to help create those laboratories for innovation, and then the kind of support structures, after-school programs, college access programs, etc. But now we are at a pause moment, and it's probably similar to some of where you are, where we're starting to say, well, what are the next 15 years? If we're going to invest today in the organizations that are going to have a huge impact on our education 15 years from now, what should we be investing in? And so what I want to share with you is just what we're thinking about and where we've started to place some bets. And while we're continuing to do what we're doing, you will see we're really focused on differentiated learning, on the non-academic skills. I think this links up to a lot of what Stieg had to share, beyond academic achievement, and leveraging data to inform instruction. So now we're starting to say, well, what is really out there that is doing that? And so we've recently, what we do is we sort of do a national landscape analysis. For those who don't know, there are 150 nonprofits start a day in America, and the majority of those are in education. So there's a lot to pick from, actually. The problem is that most of those nonprofits have budgets that are very small, and none of them really get to scale to a level that they could serve multiple school districts. So what we go out and do is try to find the ones that we think have the potential to scale and give them a lot of support to really become national models. And so what I wanted to do is share some of the learnings that we're experiencing, and I will also share that I have sort of a personal passion in the first one, which is differentiated learning. And partly that's because I'm dyslexic and my daughter's dyslexic, and so I started to really ask, how are we serving dyslexic kids? And as I learned, a lot of the work was so focused and so expensive on a very, very small population, but it was really only on about 3% of the kids, when we all know that even with dyslexia and ADHD, it's about 20% of the population. Similarly, I had a daughter who was very, very talented and wanted to be challenged all the time while dyslexic. So she was sort of my own focus group of one, of like, how do I keep her engaged in education in the system? And so that led me to start a special fund at New Profit focused on differentiated learning, which we're just doing. And I was just meeting with Don Deschler, who some of you might know. He invented the response to intervention system, and actually Susan was in the meeting, and he came away from our meeting and he said, what I think is interesting about focusing on those on the sort of both margins, whether it's on the, kids with challenges and kids, who are really talented, is if we can figure out how to teach them at a cost that makes it possible, then we can learn how to teach the average. And so rather than starting with how to teach the average kids, let's focus on who's on the extremes and what technologies and opportunities are out there that can support those kids to really have a robust learning experience. So one of the things that we've been experiencing, and we believe is sort of the next 10-year horizon, is that as opposed to what we know now, which is a very small select group of children have individualized learning plans, what I'm seeing in the future, just looking at the market, not to depersonalize this, but to look at what the different nonprofits are doing, is that someday, relatively soon, every child will have an individualized learning plan. Every child will know their profile, and they will self-advocate. Like some of this, we talk a lot about how we're going to respond to them, but actually children will, I see my daughter, she's 10, she is out there saying, I'm sorry, I can't really learn that way. Would you mind reading it to me? Would you mind? And you see these kids being empowered by their learning plans. And so imagine the day where we have every kid with a different learning plan where they say, actually, I want to go to Khan Academy and learn that online, or I want to understand it this way or that way, and really imagining what the world will look like in that day. So we're starting to imagine that and looking at what kind of nonprofits we should be investing in today to support you all. And I want to hear from you, what do you need? What do your teachers need? How's it going to work when we get to this new world order? Secondly, and I think, I'm guessing because I didn't get to hear your whole presentation, Stieg, but I'm pretty sure you covered this topic well. But we invested in a charter network called the KIPP Academies. And 10 years ago, they were really focused 100% on academic performance. And in the yellow box, it talks about they got 90% into private and parochial schools, but only 21% graduate from college. So while what they started to learn is, what are we doing wrong? We're getting the right academic results. We're getting them into parochial schools or private schools, or we're getting them, but they're not graduating from college. And it was really David Levin, one of the founders, who started saying, we're not doing enough. We've got to start not only measuring academic performance, but this sort of, as he calls it, character performance, and Duckworth and some of the research that Stieg referenced around grit, resiliency, persistence. What will it look like when we start to, in schools, not only measure kids' academic performance, but how are they developing as people? And I think that's a question that we can be the leaders on here in Brookline, is through my husband, who, as you all know, started City Year. We've been big believers in service learning, in the ideas of engaging kids in their community. There are lots of other ways that are cost efficient to start to think about how we develop these kids in a very well-rounded way. So I think you hit this point well, so I'm not going to push too further on that. Data, and unfortunately you can't see the slide, but it says I'll pause for a moment so you can let all this information sink in. This is what I'm sure any teacher feels like at this point. We have, with Common Core standards and all of that, there is no lack of data that we are going to have on these kids and et cetera. But the question is, how do you use that data in a way to change behavior in the schools, in a way that's productive not only for the teachers and the students, but for the parents? How do the parents start to learn? I know that I'm tracking many data points on my daughter because of her unique learning disabilities, and I'm always confused. I just can barely read the material. It takes so long to understand what it really means and whether she's making progress. So helping to create organizations and invest in organizations like Achievement Network, like Goalbook, like many enterprises that are now starting to help teachers use that data, collect it, process it, and then help them differentiate the learning. So a lot of the challenge is, how would a teacher look at a classroom and see all these different students individually and then deploy the curriculum? So we are looking for organizations that are going to help teachers use that data. So I just picked those three as some of the sort of main themes that we're starting to think about as we think about investing. And as I understand it, I mean, these are the kinds of questions we're asking, and I'm curious what you all are thinking. One of the things that Susan mentioned to me, and I think is really exciting, is this new school that you all are contemplating. And I'm sure there are a zillion ideas of what's going to happen in that new school, but I'll just throw out that I think if we could create a real innovation laboratory where we were testing some of these new techniques and new tools for teaching and measuring performance and other things, we could help move some of these innovations into more use throughout the whole district. So I'm curious how you're thinking about that new school and whether some of these ideas and techniques will be ones that you will imagine using. So I will leave it at that. I hope that's helpful to you all and relevant. I don't know if it is, but that's what we're thinking about.
Ms. Gatto?
It's been very interesting listening to both of you. And as I think about this, it strikes me that there's one thing at the heart of what both of you are saying, and that is the teacher. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is we are in a situation where we are contemplating the possibility of higher class sizes, wide range of students in the class, with the teacher responsible for differentiating instruction, and most importantly in my mind, the need for the teacher to really interact one-on-one in such a way that the student understands, as Stig said, that he or she is loved, that the teacher has high expectations for them, that the teacher will help them and support them in their learning. Now, much of what I hear coming out of groups like yours, which give money to various organizations, you're focusing on a lot of different things. But what are you focusing on that will help the teacher? I don't mean the new computer program or that kind, the helping the teacher learn to read data. I mean helping the teacher do his or her job day by day in that classroom when there is just increasing pressure on them to do more. Yeah. What I think personally we need are more people in the classroom who are supporting the teachers in ways that allow them to do the work. And frankly, we don't know where to get the money to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, I'll speak for a moment about what City Year is doing. Some of you might know, but now a City Year core of 10 kids will go into a school, and they will be able to do that pull out of that one kid who's acting out, or be that loving, you know, jungle gym maybe a kid needs for a minute because they're acting out, or they call all the parents whose kids don't show up to school. They are there to welcome everybody when they come in the morning. And increasingly, and one resource we do have is AmeriCorps, which you know, my husband and I are a big part of creating. We have 75,000 young people serving our country, and we can get them into any school. I mean, they do serve in urban poor schools mostly, but they can serve anywhere. And I think we have a human capital issue in general on not thinking it's just the teacher. I mean, I would, you know, it's be downright scary to be that teacher responsible for all of those variables. And we have to surround that teacher with some more supports, whether they're, you know, other young people who can volunteer their time, or, you know, older people who can volunteer their time, or, I mean, we all know, built in our own backyard, citizen schools, which is bringing citizens into the schools. We have to think of this as a community. It takes a village to raise a child. And so we are actually trying to invest in organizations that provide that sort of surround support, not just by bringing other human capital into the building. So I think it's a great idea. Any other?
Ms. Kershaw.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for your presentation and for all you're doing to help us innovate in education. So I have 2 children in the 20%, and I spent a lot of time talking with Dr. Lupini about the fact that I think we do an incredible job in Brookline with children who fit into more of the standard education model. So my really bright boys who struggle to achieve academically. So I'm really interested in differentiated instruction, but I feel like the furthest we've taken that so far is around academic differentiation rather than learning styles. Yes. And I wonder if you could talk more about sort of the pioneering side of like really responding to different methods of teaching, that project-based or getting away from some of the literacy, and how some of those learning approaches that are connected to differentiated instruction, and then how that might translate into an innovation school.
Well, you know, I can hardly say I have the answers. All I can do is say that I am mining the country for all of those techniques and entrepreneurs and approaches, and it is thrilling. I mean, in this moment in time, there is a solution to every learning style out there. And we actually know every learning style. And one of the projects that we're working on with Harvard is mapping the learning styles and getting us to one standardized, like, menu of, okay, you know, and I have, I'm glancing at this because I can never even keep track of my own kids' learning styles, but let alone other ones, but, you know, whether it's memory or spatial ordering or higher order cognition, like, we have them all. We know what they all are. We've mapped the brain, so we really know this. And what I'm doing right now is trying to match all the interventions with each learning style, so that so all parents know. You could maybe, and it doesn't, I think it's important for the school to do it, but I also think it's good for the parents to know what their options are and what they can do at home and what they can do, to supplement their kids' education. So I would love to see in Brookline, I mean, this is a personal passion, is this school serving differentiated learners in that way? And new classrooms, I don't know if that's come up. Yeah, new classrooms is one of the models that we're looking at investing in. It was started in New York City under Joel Klein, and what they're doing is literally mapping every single kid individual learning style, and then they've downloaded all the different ways you can learn like this. And so a kid walks into the school, and it's like you're walking into, Delta Airlines, and you see your name, and you see where your plane's taking off. The kid comes in and says, oh, I'm learning math this way today. And I'm going to go in a group setting today, and tomorrow I'm going to learn it visually, or tomorrow it's going to be taught to me this way. And every day they're assessing the kid's progress, feeding it back. And so it's a very individualized learning school that is currently mostly what a district like Brookline could do is say, we're just going to try this in math, or we're just going to try this in one area and test it out. And they come in and help build that for the school. But there are a lot of really exciting models. My daughter, is using an app that just works for her, and her working memory has gone up, twofold, because she's using this app. And it's a game and it's a process, but for her, she's building, the pathways that are missing for her. And so the more we know now about the brain, I mean, there are two things that are changing the game. One is how technology is helping. While I think the teacher is a loving relationship, and it's critical to have that, there are technologies now that can literally change things. So we have now, one, technology, and two, we know a lot more about the brain. I mean, we can do an fMRI, and my son is 4, and he will know whether he's dyslexic, in the next 6 months. And he doesn't even read. So it's going to be game-changing for all of us that now you can diagnose dyslexia before they're reading. So will be a tricky waters for us all to maneuver through, but also really exciting because we can get the kids what they need, and their brains are plastic, and they can develop the pathways anytime. So it's pretty exciting.
So we need to begin
Yes,
to move.
no,
But
thank you
hold
all
on.
for-
No, wait one moment. I thought we needed one more question, and I wanted to take the opportunity
Okay.
to ask it, if that's all right with my colleagues. And you began to refer to it when you were talking about technology a minute ago, and I just wanted to ask you, generally speaking, suppose we were to develop some kind of an innovation laboratory, as you described it, for our new school.
Yes.
To what extent would our technology capabilities be important in that school, and to what extent would we be able to utilize technologies as part of the mix of what we were able to do?
I think it would be critical. I think it's extraordinarily doable. And I think that there are people who want, I think the innovators in the world right now, especially anybody who's in the sort of MIT, Harvard arena, they're looking for platforms to put some of these great experiments on. And so I think that there are ways that we can be a platform. I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. My whole life I was a platform for every innovation coming out of Harvard. Lawrence Kohlberg, I was in his program. I was in everybody, but it was a great opportunity. It worked well. But it also is something that we can, quote, capitalize on in Brookline because we are near proximity to the leaders. I mean, I'm meeting with the neuroscientists who are the leading neuroscientists on dyslexia. They're right there at Harvard. They're right there at Children's Hospital, and they're dying to try out some of these things. And so we could do some really, I think if we made this school the innovation laboratory, we could get a lot of resources for that. So I'm happy to talk more about that. But
Okay.
all right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Is Paul Epstein still available out there? Paul, I apologize for holding you up. Thank you for your patience. We went into the middle of something before you came. So Paul Epstein is here, and he is really a key innovator himself in providing the energy and the organization to bring to Brookline something that it had not had up until now, which is a teen center. And he's coming to talk to us briefly about where we are in that progress, and some of us walk by it almost every day, and so we know there's something happening. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Alan. I'm actually a pinch hitter tonight. Matthew Cooney, who's the executive director of the Brookline Teen Center, told me to apologize. He's home and has no voice and is very ill and couldn't make it tonight. So I'm happy to fill in this evening for him and give you guys an update on where the project stands. Many of you have been hearing about the project for as long as 8 years. That's the entire run from conception of the idea to now. And I'm happy to start the presentation tonight by reporting that we're now just about 3 months from completing the construction and a few more months from actually opening. We're trying to plan for a September opening to coincide with the start of the next school year. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the project, I'll let you know what it is. We are about to open Brookline's first teen center. It's a private nonprofit organization that will operate very much like a Boys and Girls Club, but zeroing in on the teen population in Brookline. And it will be opening, as I said, in the fall. Membership will come from the Brookline community, kids that either attend school in Brookline or live in Brookline. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed out that you do not have to live in Brookline or attend the Brookline Public Schools to go there. That would include private school kids, even kids that come to the Brookline schools but live elsewhere. Is this how I move this?
Figured out N.
Excuse me?
The letter N.
Oh, the letter N. Thank you, Vanessa. Oh.
Is it working?
No, not on this one. Okay. Is there some? Space bar. Let me try that. There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Oh, that's the end of the presentation now. I'm just going backwards, but that's okay. I will do the presentation in order, but the slides may not line up. I brought some cool visuals. Maybe I'll just scroll through some of those. This is a conceptual picture of what the teen center will look like. Alan mentioned he walks by it every day. Many of you have either walked or driven by it. The location of the teen center is 40 Aspinwall Avenue. It's directly behind the Walgreens. That's across the street from Pierce School. The building for many years has been operating as either a auto body garage or a parking lot. And we have actually entered into a 25-year lease for that garage. So we will be around for quite some time. I hope for even longer than that. So we are actually renovating the building at our own expense as a private organization. The total price tag of the renovation is about $3.7 million. We've currently raised $5.2 million for the project. So that gives us a nice cushion. And I do want to point out that the campaign that we're on, the fundraising campaign, is still very much in progress, and we're hoping to tack on a few more million to that, to our goal of about 8 to 10 million total, which will give us a nice endowment to be able to help run the center every year and defray some of the operating expenses, salary of staff and building expenses, rent, and so forth. Let me give this another try. Now it's not working at all. That's okay.
Well, let's see if we can get you some help. Peter, is it possible to help?
Always possible.
Sorry for the technical.
What do you want to go forward?
I'd like to just scroll it through if possible. While they're working on that, I'll give you a verbal tour of the center and let you know what some of the spaces inside will be. And I encourage, by the way, all of the school committee members and the audience members that are attending tonight to please take a tour of the center while it's under construction. It might be fun to see it now and then compare it to when it's open. It is a construction site, but we do have the ability to give tours. You would just have to get in touch with a Teen Center staff member through the website, brooklineTeenCenter.org. But if you should ever go in there, what you would see is 11,000 square feet of space that's going to be filled with teenagers during the out-of-school hours starting in September. And I remember Dr. Weintraub saying, why would anyone be crazy enough to go to a building with thousands of teenagers in it? But some staff, not me, but some staff are going to be crazy enough to go there. I will open it up to questions later. Any question is good. The only question I got ever that, I wouldn't call it a dumb question, but a silly question was, will there be staff there? Of course there will be staff there. It's not going to be the Lord of the Flies in there, you know. We're going to hire, we actually have staff, one of whom is homesick tonight, Matthew Cooney, who's a experienced youth work professional, social workers, 15 years of working with the teenage population, and we're thrilled to have him in place. He's already begun working, even though the center's not open, supervising the construction and fundraising and things like that. We'll have probably 2 other full-time staff members that will work under Matt as assistant directors. They'll be on the floor supervising the spaces, running programming, and also supervising a plethora of part-time staff positions. Many of the part-time staff positions will be kind of tied to the areas, which actually I was about to tell you about and never got to. So the Teen Center will have 3 main domains, if you want to think about it as like a triangle. One would be social and emotional well-being, activities that will help teens navigate safely through their teenage years. A second area would be physical and recreational activities, like a Boys and Girls Club. You can't have a Boys and Girls Club without fun and games and ping pong and pool and basketball. And then the third area would be academic and enrichment activities. So each space that I'll now list is sort of tied into one of those 3 domains. Let's start with the fun stuff. Why not? There's a bowling alley in the Teen Center. Is this going to work or not? Let's see. It's not built yet, but this is a fun picture of all the teen interns and some of the architects standing in one of the spaces. A bowling alley, a basketball court, a fitness center, very, very excellent fitness center. I would compare it to like the Beacon Hill Athletic Club down the street. Smaller version of that. There is a music studio with a recording studio inside and a music rehearsal space. There is a dance studio, which could be used for any number of things, from yoga to exercise to dance. There's also a game room and an academic mezzanine that's actually 1,000 square feet of academic space. That was one of the only pieces of new construction. Mostly it was just filling up this shell of a building with stuff, but we actually did construct, at some cost, a self-contained mezzanine. It's got very high ceilings, this building, so we have a second floor now that's purely an academic space. So there's a large classroom in there, there's small group study space, and the things that we can envision happening in there, I think, would interest the school committee and any parent. Homework completion, tutoring, homework help, maybe even if you really let your imagination go, alternative uses of the building during the day when the kids aren't there, like a GED program, or working with the school on conceptualizing maybe a in-district placement program for kids that need a break from the public schools for a short period of time. So those are some of the spaces. Have I left out anything? My own job as a social worker, I'm going to be able to not be a member of the Teen Center because I'm long past my teenage years, but I can go there, and the reason why is because we put in some counseling rooms in the Teen Center. So a person like me, whose job is to speak to kids one-on-one or in small groups every day at the high school, I can now have a little bit of flexibility in my schedule and offer to meet a kid during the out-of-school time, after school in the afternoons, at the Teen Center. And it was kind of a win-win decision to go that route because, frankly, we didn't have the budget to hire social workers, nor did we have it in our budget to hire a music teacher, a fitness instructor. It never would have been fiscally possible. Instead, we just built the spaces and looked to partner with other organizations. So social workers from the high school, social workers from the Brookline Community Mental Health Center, fitness instructors from local gyms, music people from Berkeley College that might even do it free of charge as a college internship or co-op placement. So we're really looking to become a hub of teen activity in Brookline, but partner with existing organizations like the rec department, the school department, BATV, you name it. And I also, while I'm rolling off organizations, I want to mention a few that have been really instrumental in helping get this project off the ground over the last 8 years. One at the forefront would be the Brookline Community Foundation. So they really incubated this project during the early years and helped us before we even incorporated as a nonprofit corporation. The school department as well. I remember some people in this room were on the very first exploratory committee that we did form years ago. Since this is not working anymore, it's a shame because we have some great photos. So I'll pass this around for people to look at, and I'll take questions while you guys are doing that. The budget of the center is probably going to be in the neighborhood of $600,000 a year, or at least for the first year, and then we will grow from there. Oh, while you think of your questions, a couple quick points. I mentioned the demographics, that it could come from Brookline or kids that go to school in Brookline. The ages, that's important. We're going really more by grades, 7th grade through 12th grade. So middle school, think of middle schoolers and high schoolers using this space during the out-of-school hours. The hours would be from right after school until well into the evening, a little bit later on the Friday and Saturday nights, prime times when we want to offer kids a place to be, staying out a little bit later on those nights. Now, I know this would probably be asked, so I'll just go ahead and answer it, which is how are we going to deal with middle school versus high school, two very distinct populations. And we do have a plan for that, and essentially the plan is that they actually will not be there together at the same time. After much consideration and kind of research and focus groups on that topic, I think the idea of just having a 12th grader dancing with a 7th grader just scared us too much, you know. So we decided to go that route. So we don't have the schedule hammered away, you know, in stone just yet, but we'll have certain nights and times when middle schoolers will have access, including some of those prime times, by the way, those Friday evenings, Saturday evenings. We want both of those age groups to be able to have some of those key times. And then there will certainly be times when the middle schoolers wouldn't be there, but high schoolers would be. When you think about how this is going to be used, think of a mix of structured and unstructured activities and programming. So I like to say at the project, we're not afraid of the words hanging out. That's kind of the second job of teenagers after being students. So we want them to be there. You know, I was going to introduce this presentation as a plan to deal with the overcrowding at the schools that's coming during the after-school hours. Because if you go to the high school at like 5 o'clock, there's tons of kids hanging out there. This will address that problem. I can't help you with the during the school hours, but yeah. Yeah. All right. So any questions at all on anything that I talked about? And enjoy looking at those pictures, and come take tours. Yes.
Ms. Charlupski?
So you alluded to hours, but didn't really say.
I can be specific on hours, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. And do kids need to pay to join? Or
Great question. Great question. Let's start with the hours. So the hours will be something in the neighborhood of 2:45 until 10 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock. And then when I said later, I did mean midnight on Friday and Saturday nights. We're permitted anyway to stay open that late. We'll see if it's 11 or 12. But for special events, especially, we would want to be open as late as midnight or 11 o'clock when we do have a dance, a concert. So some of the great things that can happen there, just Battle of the Bands nights and, you know, hosting concerts and film series and bowling leagues. And then your second question was about the pay. Yes. So it's a key part of the plan for sustainability is that we do need some revenue. We'd love to make it just completely free for everyone. But right now we're thinking about $10 a month or $120 a year for a membership to this place. And the simplest way to say the next part is no student would ever not be able to join for financial need reasons. So we're already actually talking to organizations like Steps to Success about a plan for access there and any kid that's on free and reduced lunch. And we're looking at a number of options there. So, but $120 a year, you think about it, the price of going to one movie per month for a kid, access to the equivalent of like joining a health club and, you know, having all this programming and after-school activities. So I think it's a pretty good bargain. Yes?
Ms. Stone?
Thanks, Paul. It's really, really fun to see you guys at this stage. It's amazing. Having
Thank
been
you.
one of the people there 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Those
Yeah.
original conversations. This is out of school time. What about vacations? What about summers? Do the hours change? Is
Yep.
there different programming? What are you thinking?
We
about
will
that?
certainly be open year-round, so summers, absolutely. Whether we are open 7 or perhaps 6 days a week is not determined yet. I would say it's possible we'd be open 7 days a week, but also likely that we'll give our staff a break and a day to kind of breathe, perhaps on a weekday, perhaps being even open Saturdays and Sundays, but maybe closed on a Monday, which a lot of youth centers that we've researched do that. So yeah, we would be open. Holidays, Matt's already thinking about things like that. Do employees get Christmas, Thanksgiving off, or any other holidays? So, but in general, you'll probably be surprised by how much we're open and not surprised by how not often we're open. Yeah.
Other questions? And you say you think your target is to be open in September?
One other thing I wanted to mention is the construction company and the architect are all local people. The construction company is called Kaplan Construction. The architect is Studio MLA, standing for Mike Lindstrom Associates, Brookline High School parent office right on Harvard Street. And Kaplan is on Harvard Street. They're both within actually like a stone's throw of the teen center, which made for a very convenient construction period. But they assure us they'll be done with construction by the end of May. So that means that we could actually do some soft opening type activities throughout the summer and really gear up for a first couple weeks of the school year opening, including a huge party on a weekend, which you're all invited to.
Great. Well, bravo.
Thank you.
That's a real,
But keep the things circulating so people can see the pictures.
thank you so much,
Okay.
really. So I think we're just about ready to open our public hearing. And I just wanted to comment that we have one minor subject that we're going to cover very briefly during this open hearing, and that is I have to make a comment on the question of school choice. That has to be done in an open hearing, and so we'll use this open hearing. It won't take long at all, and then we will move to the comments that I think people... we will move to comments, and we will move to a initial set of comments by Superintendent Lupini. And I wanted to just go over a couple of details first. If you have not signed up, I'm hoping that all the people who are here have signed up who want to comment. If you're just here to listen, that's fine. If you haven't, Ms. Coyne, do we have more? If there's anybody who'd like to sign up, they should come and sign up here. Would people raise their hands, those people who want to comment, so I can gauge how many people there are? Okay. That's true. That's very true. We did say that we were going to start at 8:30, and we are starting a little early. So and I think we will start, but I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Ms. Ditkoff. So why don't I just read the comment that I'm obliged to read about school choice, and then Dr. Lupini will make some remarks, and then we'll proceed. So the school choice law contained in the Education Reform Act of 1993 presumes that each school committee will admit non-resident students under the school choice program unless there is a vote to the contrary by June 1st of each year, following a hearing on the issue of whether or not to participate. And we're combining the public hearings on the budget and school choice since the proposed fiscal year 2014 budget does not include funds for school choice. We plan to take a vote on school choice at the first school committee meeting after the upcoming local election, which is on May 9th. And the budget public hearing is an opportunity for the public, if they want to express their concerns with the proposed budget, including if they want to say anything about school choice. School committee members have had an opportunity to attend the superintendent's community forums on the budget, and we plan to vote on the budget either April 11 or possibly before. So that's my statement. No questions. We will go right to Dr. Lupini's comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. So let me say a couple things, and let me talk about addendum number 2, which was distributed yesterday and today. First of all, I've been able to say at a couple of forums the last few days that I think to reemphasize that from our view, this is largely a revenue issue, that while we continue to experience much of what we're experiencing this particular year, largely because of our growing enrollment, and because we're in the third year of a set of collective bargaining agreements, where people took zeros and lesser increases in year one in particular, that we've made an assumption that the governor's recommended budget will not be what's adopted by the legislature. The difference specifically to Brookline in those two numbers is that we've assumed $1.7 million in Chapter 70, which is our normal, Chapter 70 is school funding, and the governor's package would provide $2.8 million. And as I said to parents and others at a forum yesterday morning, and then at a individual school forum last night, we'd be having a very different conversation if we were talking about something closer to the governor's package. That's not a settled issue. The House will begin to debate their budget the week of the 22nd of April, and we will see a House budget during, I believe, the week of the 29th, and it would make me, for one, a very happy person if I was sitting here during that first week of May talking about the adjustments that the House had made and what the Senate might do. But the assumptions we've made are based on the information that we have to date as to what we expect that the legislature might do. But as Matt Malone, the Secretary of Education, said to people at this collaborative commission meeting on Monday, they will continue to believe that unless they hear from you. And I, for one, take the responsibility that superintendents have to make sure that their legislators know where they stand on the governor's proposals and on the future of funding for school districts like Brookline very, very seriously, and have begun already to weigh in with them on those issues and hope that others will do the same. But tonight I must talk about where we stand in terms of the revenues that are available to us now. What we attempted to do in addendum number 2, which was, as I said, published last night, is to provide the school committee with some options, specifically a series of revenue options, which beyond what we recommended in the superintendent's budget message and in addendum number 1, which was published after we received health insurance numbers, this, if viewed as a package, and it is a series of options. Someone said to me yesterday, is this a package or a series of options? And I said, we have to present a package that holds together, right? That if adopted would provide you with a budget, because my responsibility at the end of the day is to provide you with a recommendation of a balanced budget. That's my charge. So even though you can certainly view these as a series of options, we have to present them as a package, and we have. And the fact of the matter is that this series of revenue options would restore, and we believe enhance, the Enrichment and Challenge Support Program. It would provide adequate staffing to meet sectioning requirements at Brookline High School, and it would provide us with a start on our technology initiatives. I need to say up front, as I tried to say and maybe didn't say real well last week, we don't put this plan forward lightly. In fact, there are specific aspects of the plan, including charging a fee for full-day kindergarten, that we do not endorse. However, we believe that the plan at least presents a balanced package for moving the budget discussion and system forward. And as I've said to many parents over the course of the past few weeks in these forums, it really sparks an important conversation about long-term revenue options that could be available to the town in the future to deal with our historic enrollment growth and other funding priorities. And so the 6 pieces of these revenue options and what we would recommend if this were to be something the committee were interested in discussing further begin with the possibility of community contributions. This would permit parents and community groups to partially pay for staff salaries. We have historically resisted that endeavor. Specifically, we've suggested, because we've been asked by so many parents, that these contributions would go toward the system-wide Enrichment and Challenge Support Restoration proposal, as described in Addendum 2. The monies, we believe, would only be raised on a one-time basis for FY14, providing the school committee with time to review the program and look for future revenue supports. We believe the monies would need to be donated to a third party, such as one of our foundations that we work with, and earmarked for the system-wide program, not an individual school or teacher. That no decision could be made about the level of restoration possible unless and until we had the minimum amount needed to be raised, and we are talking about anywhere here in terms of the restoration package between $0 and $100,000 that we could utilize, as I'll describe later. The second prong here is to charge $1,000 per student for families wishing to access the full-day kindergarten option, beginning with those who would come to our kindergartens in September of 2013. As I laid out for the committee last week, this would require us to implement a half-day option for those who were not interested in paying for the service. We would establish, of course, a scholarship program for those needing financial assistance for the full-day fee. And while it's very difficult to generate any kind of projection on the revenue, because we would be the only district I know of that's ever gone from having a full-day option at no charge to charging for an option. Most people use the charge in order to implement their program. We do believe that that this proposal could generate between $250,000 and $400,000, and I know I normally get more exact than that, but that's about the best I can do right now. We recommend that that would continue if the school committee chose to engage in that conversation until an alternative source of revenue to support ongoing budgetary needs were to be identified. We would recommend taking another $50,000 from our reserves to help make this package work. We're very concerned about that. That would leave us with $350,000 beyond our contingencies for our exceptional general and special education costs. And in addition, would, if those funds were to be utilized in this spending plan, would leave us with an even larger hole to dig out of at the beginning of FY15. I'll tell you one other reason that we don't recommend going anywhere beyond that $50,000, and we're comfortable doing that. More than from time to time, while I sit here and tout what we would like the legislature to do in terms of dealing with the governor's projections and his proposals, we do hear from time to time that there is a chance that the legislature may not fund Chapter 70 at the level that we've assumed. So remember, 2 years ago we got $1 million new in Chapter 70. Last year it was 1.7. That's part of what we've based the 1.7 on. There are rumblings, those associated with the legislature, that they may not choose to meet that number in their efforts to provide for the transportation package that they're looking to put into place. So we're very worried about that, and I would not want to go beyond our contingencies at these levels until we have better information from the legislature. What we would do in terms of what these funds that were available to us would start with high school staffing. We presented in Addendum 1, last week, a package that reduced high school sections even further than were outlined in the first proposal. That is, we went up to eliminating 15 sections, 3.0 FTE. We believe that goes too far, and we believe that we need to restore 1.0 of that. We're suggesting doing it in this package rather than waiting and seeing when we need to do it out of contingencies down the road, because we believe it's going to happen. We recommend then restoring the ECS program referenced and I hope more fully described here, which was referenced in the superintendent's budget message. We would recommend in this package $150,000 of a base level of funding, and the specific level of staffing beyond that would be contingent upon the amount of funding generated from those community contributions I talked about. We believe we could create with that full $100,000 a model that includes an 1.0 FTE coordinator and 3.0 FTE teacher coaches in our schools. And pardon me for reading, but I do want to do that to make sure I clarify the issues that have been discussed over the last couple of weeks with respect to this model. Specifically, we propose to shift the current building-based consulting teacher model to a system-based teacher-coach model. These coaches will work across all schools to increase the capacity of teachers to challenge students by providing direct in-class coaching to classroom teachers in the following areas: utilizing various strategies to differentiate instruction, extending the curriculum, creating relevant and rigorous interdisciplinary projects, integrating technology, and providing for students' social emotional needs, for example, organizing peer groups. The system-based coaching model allows these individuals to better coordinate services to our teachers, allows for more long-term support of grade level and/or grade span teachers, and encourages classroom teachers to implement the coaching strategies throughout their curriculum, not just in the unit with which they're working with the teacher on. And then our system level coordinator, we believe, needs to work with us to expand virtual high school opportunities, to implement our grade and subject area acceleration processes, to coordinate services with Brookline High School, because remember, another part of this program that we haven't spent much time talking about over the last few weeks is that 6 years ago there was only one school where students left their elementary school to take classes at Brookline High School, and that was the devotion school. That was the only school where that happened, and that is no longer the case. Leading research on the role of technology and leading the investigation of other community resources. And then lastly, we believe if there's some sum of money left here in this package, that should go toward our technology initiative. It's not going to make much more than a start at what we need to do, but we do need to do it because, as has been reported to this committee over and over again, our teachers are telling us through things like our NEASC self-study, our teachers are telling us through their work through the mentoring program, that this system is woefully behind in terms of putting technology in teachers that, quite frankly, they can access in the districts that we compete with. So we must take additional steps to replace our aging classroom computers, provide appropriate computers to teachers, equip our new classrooms, provide audiovisual and peripheral support to classrooms, and appropriately outfit our special education learning centers. We must take steps to do that. And I believe that most of that is going to come through work we'll do with the town on the capital improvement plan beginning in 15, or could be part of a bigger question put to the community down the line. But I believe that somebody asking me, why can't this wait? And I've said because it's already 2 to 3 years behind. We believe that the revenue generating strategies described here, while it pains me to put them forward, are designed as a bridge to more permanent sources of revenue and support in the future. A bridge. They allow us not to lose some programs that clearly people in this community have told us are important to them. They allow us to move forward on some initiatives while quite frankly, we create the more permanent source of revenue and support while protecting this community and its school values. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lupini, very much. I think that if there are some questions of Dr. Lupini, I would prefer to wait until after the comments, and then we'll have a chance to go around, if that's okay with everybody. Yes. Okay. For folks who are out in the hall, if you'd like to come and sit in front, we can make some more room.
Thanks.
So I just wanted to make another couple of comments. Number one, if you haven't signed up yet to speak, you can sign up with Ms. Coyne. She has an extra sheet for that. Right now, there are a reasonable number of people who want to speak, and so I'm going to at least start out enabling people to speak for 5 minutes, although I might have to change that to 3 minutes, and I don't encourage everybody to speak for 5 minutes. If you can do it in 3 minutes or less, all the better. I will give you an alert if there are 30 seconds to go, and I will ask you not to exceed the time limit there. I see that all of the comments that are signed up so far either have to do with our enrichment and challenge program or our music program. And so what I'd like to do is to vary the comments between the two, so I won't quite take them in order. I'll just vary back and forth if that's okay. So I will start with somebody that we know well, Jessica Wenda-Shubo, who I saw there, and Jessica will definitely give you 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, because I was encouraged by the question of looking for innovative ideas from the community. I'm not a nonprofit, but representing the Brookline Educators Union, I'd like to do 2 additional things I don't have in my notes. One is to request that we bring some teachers here to do a Brookline Learning Series event with members of the Brookline Educators Union to talk about their vision for improving education. And we could come together and do that like we normally do collectively. So maybe we could talk about that after, scheduling that. But I want to speak tonight actually as a social studies teacher, as well as someone representing the close to 1,000 teachers, caseload specialists, curriculum coordinators, vice principals, and paraprofessionals. I also speak as a member of the Brookline community who goes home at night to Boston. Now, I know that the staff of the Central Administration, Dr. Lapini, the rest of his staff, worked very, very hard on these proposals all week to come up with a stopgap measure. Dr. Lapini, you mentioned it as balanced, but as we know from the national debate with the sequester, balance isn't not necessarily better. So I'm going to ask you tonight to make funding human connection, that is real relationships between educators, students, and their families, the funding priority, and allow the technology and still more of the reserve funds to wait for us to commit together, both in the short run and the long run, to a call for raising the revenue needed to sustain our excellent school system. And with that in mind, I want to ask the school committee for one more thing, and that is to join the BEU in endorsing the current campaign to fund our communities, which I understand from my emails may in fact change that balance with this year's budget at the state level. And I think we are much closer today, thanks to the efforts of so many, than we might have thought. And so I'm going to come back to you with ask for a formal endorsement of the pledge to support the campaign. And now my innovative idea is to, but I think she left, so she won't have the benefit of hearing from the community folks here, to ask the new profit Incorporated to immediately release some of that $100 million to the general ed fund, so that a unionized group of teachers and other educators, our school committee and Dr. Lapini's staff can work together to solve these problems. And I think we won't be in the crunch that we're in. So I'd be happy to speak with her and contribute in any way to seeing that emergency release of funding. I understand the trade-offs, though, in the proposal. As a social studies teacher, I know the value of access to computer technology. It enabled me to tap into that multi-sensory cultural world of my students, whether it was like filling the room with the Flight of the Valkyries to show them that fascism can be a dangerous and compelling force in a middle-class community. It was in Germany. And to have them feel that music. It enabled us to teach them how to do citations electronically, and in so doing to really learn what is plagiarism, what are the ethics of research. So I know that we need that process. But the romance with expensive technology, including platforms that try to reduce numerical data, the human experience of teaching and learning can turn into a problem, not a solution, once it starts to displace educators' ability to build the relationships that are at the heart of our work. Educators, as I don't think you disagree, are the lifeblood of the district. So let me look at the ECS proposal. Taking the teachers out of the buildings breaks the bonds of understanding and experience that take time and space to build. Those meaningful personal relationships with and among students, staff, and the families in the community are something that you cannot replace with folks that are really moving as much as coaches might. Think of music in person, created together, not just the instrumental lessons for the individuals, precious as those are, I know because I'm taking banjo lessons. That engages, and by the way, in light of the match comments, it takes a lot of discipline.
You have 30 seconds to go, and I will ask you to be completed by then, ma'am.
What community am I speaking of when I talk about that? I want to suggest that we're embedded in a regional community, not just a municipality, and that MEDCO is the model of that kind of infrastructure, overcoming physical barriers to creating a culturally rich, diverse community. That remedied an education funding system that made wealth, not humanity, the source of entitlement to excellent
Please complete
education.
your comments now. It's 5 minutes.
What it does is overcome the idea of distant, wealthier folks making education policy for usually kids of color in neighborhoods. And unless we overcome that through this kind of regional funding, we will have more and more families rushing into Brookline, where it hasn't yet taken over, though I hear some simmerings of an interest.
Ms. Winter-Schubel, we're going to ask you to complete your comments now. We have a lot of other people to talk, and you're setting an example.
I have
Thank you.
completed by saying this act to fund our communities is a way to use MEDCO's example to think a little more broadly. So
Thank you very much. Martin Ramos, please, to speak on the music program.
Hi, I live in the Lawrence School District. I have a senior in high school, a boy, double bass player. And I have an autistic sixth grader at the Runkle School, also a double bass player. Speaking to the match comment, I'll continue the thought that this woman tried to start putting out. It takes a lot of practice. And I've seen it with my older son that he's turned into the top of his class academically. But I know where it started, and it started with music. He not only music, he learned it on swim team also, but it's changed his life completely. And I just need to advocate for the music that way. For my younger son, autistic, last year when he was at Runkle at Lincoln, he, at the beginning of the year, he threw a tantrum in his class, and it was clear that the class was not going to work for him. And he's back in the inclusive class this year, But we took the opportunity, since he had to be pulled out, to triple up on the music. And he did music 3 times a week at Runkle, and it made all the difference in the world for him academically. And not only that, it also showed all the people who work with him, especially his parents, what he could do, and provided us motivation to continue, take the work elsewhere. And I appreciate the difficulties of the budget constraints you have. I really do. And I would say that it's clear that the parents in the community here need to advocate for greater funds, and they need to speak with their representatives to try to push forward Governor Patrick's budget. So I get that message, and I will be advocating for that. And the rest of the people in this room will also, and it will make a difference. But I also need to advocate for the music program, and I also need to caution that not only would the cuts reduce the number of classes that the children are exposed to, but it would also change the staffing, likely change the staff that actually teach the remaining classes, and affect greatly the quality. You need to make sure that the music classes that remain, the strings classes and the brass classes, are actually taught by people who know those instruments. Really. And I see a great danger that under the proposal as it's structured right now, that you will really damage the classes that remain. And that will have really unfortunate cascading effects down the next few years. So I would encourage you to be very careful there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Lydia Schreier, are you here?
Also, Mr. Morse, could you ask everybody to say their name and where they live, or what school they're
That'd be fine.
connected to? Thank you.
Good, thank you. Ms. Schreier, you want to say your name and what school you're representing and where you live, please?
Yes, good evening. My name is Lydia Schreier. I'm speaking tonight as a parent of a first and third grader at Driscoll School. I'm also speaking as a representative of the Townwide Parent Advisory Committee for the Enrichment and Challenge Support Program. I want to begin by thanking the school committee for providing parents the opportunity to participate in the discussion about the difficult budget challenges facing the town. The vision statement for the Brookline School District says, Brookline provides an extraordinary education for every child. Each child's unique path to achievement is supported in academically exciting and programmatically rich environments. First among the core values behind this vision is high achievement for all students, supporting them to reach their full potential. For high-achieving students, that extraordinary education, those exciting and rich environments, that unique path to reaching their full potential is supported by the ECS program. High-achieving students need ECS. As the school committee knows from the scores of letters its members have received regarding the proposed elimination of ECS, many, many students are reached by this program. Remarkably, ECS is able to do this with a small budget and few staff. ECS manages to serve the entire school district's advanced elementary students for a fraction of 1% of the budget. Relative to other district programs, ECS is efficient, offering high impact at low cost. In fact, ECS resource teachers are able to consult with every K-8 teacher to determine what teaching methods and materials will best serve the advanced students in their classrooms. For example, my children have benefited from the small groups in the classrooms, whole class special projects, and whole grade curricula, such as critical and creative thinking. The ECS resource teacher in the school has been instrumental in determining appropriate approaches to my children's education that have allowed them to think differently and more effectively about their learning across all subjects and curricula. Importantly, the ECS model brings experienced and skilled teachers to schools being served by a relatively young cohort of teachers, as Dr. Lipsky has pointed out. For example, this is my oldest child's 4th year at Driscoll, but only his 1st year with a teacher who has had more than a year's experience in a regular classroom. The school district's second core value is excellence in teaching. While the teachers differentiate as best they can within their large and diverse classes, they rely on being able to turn to the ECS resource teachers for mentorship, innovative methods, and materials to challenge advanced students. Our teachers need ECS too. I'm extremely grateful to the tremendous effort that Dr. Lipsky has put into developing a proposal to restore ECS in the budget. The proposal in this morning's addendum reflects an appreciation that having an ECS resource teacher in the classroom is fundamental to the effectiveness of the program. However, the proposal recommends replacing the building-based consulting teacher model with a system-based teacher-coach model. What exactly does that mean for children whose potential reaching education is currently enhanced by ECS? How do we know what aspects of ECS are cost-effective and must be retained? How do we know what changes will improve the program without increasing costs? Program review is underway and needs to be able to complete its thorough and considered process and make its recommendations before changes are made to ECS. While I appreciate the efforts to restore ECS, I hope that ECS's position in the budget can also be restored to reflect what we've all been discussing. ECS is a core program, not an extracurricular activity, and it deserves a permanent place on the budget. Its funding must not be contingent on the amount of community contributions. Clearly, this year's budget is quite challenging and there will be trade-offs. We must not be willing to trade away our commitment to our children reaching their full potential and to our teachers achieving excellence in teaching them. There are many programs with much larger budgets and some programs slated for increases. Surely we can commit to shifting funds from many places in the budget to retain ECS's small portion. Community contributions may have a role in meeting the budget challenges, but let's not single out ECS as the cause or the primary recipient of these contributions. The debate should not be ECS or free full-day kindergarten, but rather how do we achieve our priorities within the current financial constraints. Dr. Lipsky has said that fundraising for staff salaries is not a sustainable model. Why not use fundraising for activities like the proposed technology updates? The figure in the budget represents an estimate. The figure in the budget represents an estimate. So can it be revisited? Can the updates be staged, awaiting the results of fundraising and the final and actual costs of the other budget items? I hope the school committee understands that those of us who have been writing you and speaking to you do so with gratitude for your efforts on behalf of our children.
30 seconds.
If we as a community believe in providing that extraordinary education for all Brookline students, believe in supporting all Brookline students to reach their full potential, believe in supporting our teachers to achieve excellence in teaching, then we must continue to fund ECS sufficiently and without contingencies as an integral part of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Sheridan on the music program. Ms. Sheridan, before you start, if there are people outside who would like to come in and sit down in front here, if you feel more comfortable about doing that, you're welcome to do so. I know it's a challenge. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Sheridan.
My name is Ann Sheridan, and I am the 3 through 8 general music and choral teacher at Pierce School. I've taught at Pierce for 8 years, and I'd like to speak briefly about the proposed music cuts. I know that you've heard from many parents, students, and even teachers from Pierce in the past few weeks, and I'm sure you've heard from parents all over Brookline who are concerned and extremely dissatisfied with the reductions in staff and teaching time that have been proposed. I also know that you've been faced with the enormous task of balancing a school budget and a booming school enrollment. I know there are a million pieces to this puzzle that must all be weighed and considered, and I don't envy the challenge. Nevertheless, I am here tonight because I am passionate about the students that I teach and what is best for them. And many of my colleagues, please stand. Dedicated, passionate music department. I love teaching at Pierce, and I am proud to be a part of the school system. However, the direction these cuts will take our music program in leaves me feeling dismayed. It seems as if some of these cuts are being made without carefully investigating the impact that they will have not on just K-3 music students or 7-8 middle school students, but on every child at every school. Our program is one that serves every student, and these cuts have a cascading effect. Music teaching time in K-3 will be cut in half. Students previously in music classes will now spend time in library or computer. This means the library and computer specialists will be spread thin, trying to absorb the extra class time. That due to this additional demand, access to the library and our one computer lab will be significantly less for all other students. This reduces the amount of time for collaboration and sophistication of the projects that are possible for all other grades. Building music staff will be asked to travel to cover instrumental classes we no longer have teachers for. And additional traveling teachers will make the already difficult task of scheduling even more of a nightmare. I could go on, but I'll stop there. It's all very inefficient to me. We will also lose a thriving middle school general music program that promotes confidence, community building, and creativity at a time when adolescents need it the most. General music provides all students with individual attention and feedback on a daily basis, as instruction can be differentiated according to every student's needs. Music education is not an isolated, independent subject. I've crafted my curriculum to connect with English and history curricula throughout the semester, helping students make real connections about history and culture they are learning about. Moreover, students feel good in music class at a time when developmentally school and home life can provide significant challenges. They can move and learn in a setting that is unlike the traditional academic classes they have all day. They are encouraged to take chances, think in different ways, and find and explore their individual voices. Learning a new instrument, composing a piece, interpreting meaning in music, it's all a venue for self-expression that can leave students feeling fulfilled, independent, creative, and most importantly, recognized for their contributions. There are many Brookline families who can send their child to Brookline Music School for guitar lessons, or join PALS or the Boston Children's Chorus, all wonderful opportunities if our programs are reduced or eliminated. But in order to really honor the philosophy and what I feel is the responsibility of quality public education in Brookline, we need to provide all of our students access to the same curriculum, and all of our students deserve quality education that includes the arts. The question I'm regularly asked every day lately is, why music? Why is one discipline being targeted with such drastic reductions in teaching time and staff when other areas are left intact? A music program worthy of Brookline Public Schools is one that teaches the whole student, addresses early childhood development, promotes literacy, reinforces habits of mind, and helps mold students into people who can make connections in their world through art and culture, long after middle school and K-3. This is the type of program that towns like Wellesley and Weston have. Newton and Cambridge are hiring and adding to their music programs this year. These are the same communities we like to consider our school system equal to or better than. I feel fortunate to work in this community full of involved and vocal families. In addition to the many caring voices you'll hear from tonight and you've already heard from, there are many more that are not able to communicate their concerns, and I hope you take them all into consideration, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mike Toffel.
Hello, I'm Mike Toffel. I'm a parent of Devotion first grader and fourth grader. I'm here to talk about ECS and really just make a few brief points. The first is many people have made this point over and over again, that challenging all learners, regardless of where they are, is a critical value that is espoused by the school committee and by the superintendent. It seems to me that the ECS program is a critical element of our ability to deliver on this value. When I've spoken to the school teachers in Devotion, and I asked them about their relationship to ECS, they all agree they can do differentiated learning, but they all agree they can do it much better with the help of ECS. So I don't see how we can be consistent with upholding this value by eliminating ECS. The program review that's ongoing right now is exactly the right steps to take to figure out what's going well and what needs to be improved. Well, that process is underway, and we should look at that when it resolves. Changing it now risks throwing out a terrific, perhaps a terrific program that's very effective, that the program review will validate for reasons that are not clear to the community. So one thing that overrides all of the priority decisions, as I've been trying to engage and learn about this process, is not at all clear to me, and I know to many other parents, how it came to be that we think that incremental investments in technology or a third special ed coordinator, how those have taken priority over a program like ECS. So whatever it is that you decide, ultimately, I hope that you'll provide more information to the community to justify the decisions you're making. I want to talk for a moment about the community funding idea, which I think is a great idea. But I also think, as an earlier speaker mentioned, that it doesn't make any sense to do this for an ongoing staff role. As the superintendent made some conditions that it has to be by a certain date and the money has to be spread across all the schools, I think those are very reasonable. But in a situation where you have to notify staff that their position was potentially eliminated by, I think, mid-April, if the funding's not guaranteed, well, that seems like the worst thing to fund, things that require such notification. Much better things to fund would be things where we actually can have some time to do some fundraising, and where if we didn't get the whole amount, a partial amount, say you can build some Wi-Fi in some schools, or you can do other technology to a smaller extent if we can't get all the money. Thinking about getting all the money within a month in order to provide security for the staff positions just seems like the worst thing possible to focus the private sector fundraising on. So that's all I wanted to say, and thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you. So we seem to have two students who want to speak together, Becky Mason and Carolyn Briggle.
Hi, I'm Carolyn. And I'm Becky, and we want to talk about the cuts to the music program. We've been going to Pierce for a long time, and we both love the music program. Our teacher, Miss Sheridan, has taught us to love music and we love music so much that we decided that we need to bring even more music into our lives. We did this by joining a choir outside of school. We love music, and we think it's horrible that some of the programs are being cut. Music is a big part of our lives. Now because of our music program, but there are younger kids who might never get the chance to experience music the way we have before. We urge you to rethink the cuts in the music program and to think about how it might affect the future generations of the children in Brookline. Thank you for your time.
Bravo. David Knight.
So I'll be very, very brief, and I'll read it to be even briefer. I'm sure you're expecting me to talk about ECS this evening, but I'm not. I think that's already been done very well. Good evening, Dr. Lupini, members of the school committee, and parents. My name is David Knight. I'm a Lincoln dad and father of 3 children, second grade twin girls and fourth grade boy. We have been in the Brookline system since Jason, our son, started his journey in Brookline schools 2 years before kindergarten. Up until now, we couldn't be happier. But frankly, now my husband Joe and I are very worried. Brookline schools face unprecedented problems, including, but not limited to, surging enrollments, shortage of space in classrooms, lack of money, and a high school that can't begin to handle what's coming. I think the projected figures were at about 1,700, and when my fourth grader gets there, it'll be about 2,500. Because this is new territory for all of us, Dr. Lupini, for you, for the school committee, and all of us as parents, may I respectfully suggest in the strongest possible terms that we bring in an outside firm that specializes in these areas to study our problems and to guide us to a comprehensive solution to our ever-growing problems. Thank you.
A high school student, Metin Tolsi Exley. Have I got it right?
Close enough.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Hello, I'm a high school senior at Brookline High School, and I went to Heath School. So I'm here to talk about the music program, specifically because I think the most important, or what I see as the most important loss would be is in the K through 3 area. Because I think that's where you see the fostering of loving of music and interest in music. All of the people, I'm doing music at the high school, I've talked to all of my friends, everyone in the program. I haven't heard a single person who said, oh, I got interested in music and started loving music after that age. That's really where kids get interested. And so obviously that's important. But in terms of cutting classes, that's going to be, I think, really detrimental. Someone used the word cascade effect. I thought that was a perfect word. Because one class, even just one, can make a huge difference. Music class is one of those classes that at the time you're doing it, it feels fun, and you always wonder, why are they supporting this? Why are we doing this? Why aren't we learning more boring fractions? But looking back on it, you're learning a lot more than I think students realize, which is, I think, why it's so valuable. Because as a student, when you walk into math class, you're expecting to learn something, you're sort of nervous towards the teacher, you're expecting to be implanted with this information and tested on it and all that fun stuff. But in music class, it's different. You're still learning, but in different ways. And you're learning those skills that are really important. The speaker, before talking about the budget with that PowerPoint and the colorful things and everything, was talking about life skills that you can learn. And I can't think of a class that has taught me more life skills than music has. You're learning, I have a whole list, you're learning how to improvise, how to read music, group work, practicing, thinking critically, culture, leadership, the list goes on. And to get those skills at such a young age without realizing that you're learning those is almost, it becomes part of you in much more of a way than I think any sort of like social leadership class could ever try and do. It's a really nice break in the day, and it's one of those classes where you can see the reward of your hard work immediately. A lot of times, kids struggle in math and they can put in a lot of work, and maybe they get a B, which is great, but it's you're not there. But in music class, you're practicing, and then you have a chorus or a concert, and there's all these people clapping, and you did great, and your choral teacher's smiling at you, and there's no better feeling than that, and you sound great. And it's one of those things where you've worked, and there's a substantive, comprehensive, tangible reward that you get out of it that teaches you that if you put in this hard work, you're going to get something out of it. And I think that's a life lesson that you can take and go anywhere with. Thank
Chad Ellis. It's great that you're following that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd like to, I was going to start by thanking the school committee, but first I'd like to start by objecting to the order of speakers.
Guilty as charged.
That was entirely fair, and I will get you one day. So, in all seriousness, I do want to start by thanking the school committee. I know that town governance is often features long periods of unrecognized work followed by bursts of punctuated disagreement and furor from the community. Last week, we saw one of those moments, and it means a lot to me as a parent, as a member of the Brookline community, as a town meeting member, to see the way that you've engaged with us on this. So I just want to say thank you for that. In the past, when I've talked about ECS, I've always been very quick to talk about the large numbers of students that are helped by this program. Dr. Lipini was kind enough to correct me the other night when I said it was at least 60%, and he said that figure's low, so that it's not just about the most accelerated learners. But I want to focus for a moment on the accelerated learners and why this program is so critical for them. I think when we talk about providing accelerated learners with an ideal environment, there's an unconscious assumption that the risk to them is very low. If someone comes into first grade reading at a third grade level, we're not worried about their literacy. So we think maybe instead of having a wonderful academic experience, they'll just have a really, really good one. They'll still thrive outside of the school if the school isn't meeting all their needs, and at worst, they'll start a software company in their spare time and make $1 million. But the risk is very real. Our kids spend more time in school and doing homework than anything else. It's a full-time job for them. If that time is frustrating, if it's not rewarding, they will check out. They will have real consequences. I saw this myself growing up. Very nearly happened to me, and it did happen to a good friend of mine who dropped out of school, one of the smartest people I've ever met, and has, to put it simply, not had the kind of life that he, his parents, or any of us would wish for him. So the risk is very real. This is why I think we need to treat ECS as so central to our education mission that cutting it or eliminating it is out of the question. If that view was shared, if we view ECS as untouchable as MEDCO or as world language or as so many other programs that we view as essential or special education, we would still have a budget proposal in front of us, and I don't think it would look so different from the one we have now. $264,135 less would be spent in other line items. Those cuts would have been difficult, but surely they would have been made. I think the central message of the many letters you've received and the overflowing of this room last week and especially this week is that a lot of parents want to see a budget that reflects that priority. This is the budget that your constituents want. Now, we have a great proposal or a set of proposals from Dr. Lipini as a possible way to go forward. I think that's fantastic. I hope that our conversation won't be limited, in effect, to an up or down vote on those proposals. I've been a CFO, I've been a department head, I've been a CEO. I know how difficult it is to make cuts, but one of the easiest ways to limit yourself from making the choices that you can make is to take a proposal and treat it as sort of fixed in stone and then say, okay, well, how can we tweak things here? We have an entire budget, and the budget needs to be looked at as a proposal and talked about together. I also want to address some things that were said last week and some of the dangers about framing that can get us into looking at proposals in maybe not the healthiest way. Last week, one of the committee members, who I believe is not here this week, expressed a concern about taking money away from one program to fund another. And that's a very natural reaction. But budgets are about choices and they're about priorities, and we've already done that. As was mentioned earlier, ECS has now been either eliminated or potentially cut, and we've expanded other programs. So that is already taking money from some programs in order to fund other ones. I also think we want to be very careful about framing and how that can lead us to look at conversations. There was a comment last week about balancing the budget on the back of kindergarten parents. If we look at this and say, we're going to charge kindergarten parents $1,000 in order to fund an ECS program that's mostly being other kids, it seems pretty unfair. It seems kind of strange. But we could have the exact same budget, the exact same numbers, and the exact same decision facing us, and phrase it as, in order to maintain full-day kindergarten, we need to charge a small fee to the parents who are using it. The same proposal seems a lot more reasonable. So I'm not singling out that proposal or anything else, but as you're looking at the budget and deciding how we can work together to save ECS, I hope you'll look at it as an entire budget
as the entire proposal and be flexible about what the solutions are, rather than assuming that the only solutions we have that we can look at are the specific proposal put forward by Dr. Lupini, with all respect. So again, thank you very much for your time. We look forward to working with you in any way we can to help save this program. I do hope that we can save it in its current form for the reasons that have already been given. But I know that you've been working very hard on this, and we really appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Alicia Shu.
My name is Alicia Shu, and I teach third grade at the Lawrence School. This is my 29th year teaching in the Brookline Public Schools. I am also a parent of 2 BHS graduates and 1 Baker School 4th grader. And I was here when I first started teaching. There was home economics and woodworking in addition to music and art. It is now a memory. But I am here tonight to the members of the school committee and Dr. Lupini. I am here tonight to express my deep concern about the proposed cuts to the music programming in our schools. As a classroom teacher, I cannot begin to comprehend the difficult decisions and pressures you face in balancing a budget during these economic times. I can respond, however, to the certainty I feel about the paramount importance of music in our core curriculum. Music is and always has been the foundation for communication and learning for young children. One that serves to build community, to cross borders, to bridge classes and cultures, to brighten perspectives, as you can see from the children who have spoken tonight, and to provide a language that everyone can sing. Many years ago, when I was an ESL teacher at Devotion, I had an 8th grade student from Taiwan. He was smart and capable, yet deeply discouraged by his poor English skills and his inability to make friends. Most afternoons, Tong would hover silently around my doorway, sullen and despondent. That is until one day when Tong learned about the blues in his music class. He told me he had learned that the roots of this American musical art form came from the work songs of West African slaves in the south of our country. Actually, he said your country. His assignment that afternoon was to write a blues lyric all his own. Tong spent hours that day penning his own struggles into an American music art form, giving rhythm to his halting English and finding power in his melancholy. He got his first American A in music for his blues song. In the weeks that followed, Tong and I engaged in call and response from my doorway, replacing those sullen glares. No longer unable to communicate, he would tell me about his day singing the blues. And Tong finally moved beyond that threshold and came inside my classroom. Just months ago, I received an email inviting me to join Tong's LinkedIn group. If only I knew how. He lives in Washington, D.C. now. He is a manager of commercialization programs at Lockheed Martin. I also don't know what that means. He is 40 years old. Although Tong may not remember any of the story I've just told you, I feel certain that music education in his young 8th grade world paved a critical and fundamental path for him to move from the periphery into the midst of learning. I feel equally certain that without a substantial music education program in our schools, many other students like Tong will remain without voice or venue. Please accept my deepest gratitude for the hard work you all do every day and the difficult decisions you make for the students, families, administrators, teachers, and staff of the Brookline Public Schools. Please do not allow music to become a memory in our schools. Keep it at the center of what we believe every student deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph Scully. Just give us an address and what school, please.
I'm a parent of 3 kids, all of whom have been through devotion school. Our oldest is 19. As you can tell from my accent, I was born in New England, but educated elsewhere. And we moved to Brookline, where we've lived near Coolidge Corner since 1994. And our oldest went through kindergarten all the way through, as did our daughter, who's now a junior at high school. And we have our youngest boy is a 5th grader, also at Devo. So each one of those kids had the great benefit of working with Carolyn Miller, I think virtually every year from K through 8. And Carolyn being, of course, the ECS teacher attached to Devotion School. And it's ECS that I really want to address my brief comments about. So firstly, I really appreciate the fact that you've wrestled with these budgetary issues so publicly and so thoughtfully. I really appreciate the responsiveness in trying to bring back funding for ECS, and I hope that will gel and materialize. One thing I would like to just focus on is the nature of ECS itself and the particular value of having a teacher who's attached to an individual school. That I think having a person with whom you interact regularly, whether a teacher or a pupil, is immeasurable and is really, if you like, the definition of quality. And I think 2 or 3 speakers before me really used the word quality, and it is quality, difficult to quantify, of course, but it's quality that we're really trying for in the educational system at every level. And I think, as Chad and Dr. Lupini have pointed out, ECS, the reach of ECS, is very deep. Probably at least 70% of all the pupils in the schools interact with that teacher. There's nothing like interacting with a specialized teacher who's going to give you a bit of creative juice, some imaginative games, give you a feeling of fun while developing your critical thinking. So I really just want to emphasize that direct contact with an individual teacher with that sense of continuity is an amazing source of quality that's very special for the Brookline system. I think I will stop at that point. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mary Epstein. Mary, you're a Pierce grandparent, it says, and I just want to tell you that I'm also a grandparent to some school kids here, so I feel very close to you.
Simpatico. Yes, I have lived in the town for 40 years. My name is Mary Epstein. My children, my daughters, attended Devotion Elementary, Brookline High, and graduated from Barnard College. I'm really a nice person. But I have some serious comments to make. I am a former PTO president, a grandmother of 4 children, currently attending Brookline Public Schools, and a music educator. The 4th child is coming into kindergarten in September. In 1980, I led the town-wide march on the State House when music was on the chopping block in Brookline schools. I have historical perspective, institutional memory, and educational understanding about Brookline music programs. Nobody wants to have a chopped-up music program in Brookline Public Schools. The current proposal to cut the Brookline Public School music program has no merit historically, educationally, psychologically, curricularly, aesthetically, or humanely. The last time Brookline was faced with cuts approaching this magnitude was in 1980 when Proposition 2.5 threatened to decimate educational excellence in the best of the Commonwealth schools, and it served to eliminate music in many of its 17 most vulnerable urban cities. The price paid was unimaginable. Current educational reform efforts adopted since by the state legislature have attempted to repair the actions of that era. It is unwise and troubling beyond measure that Brookline is toying with a repeat of the 1980s. Why and on what basis were these decisions made? I know that's been discussed, but I'm going to go through my little litany. Enrollment crisis, B-space, population, town development. B-space shows that the enrollment crisis began in 2006, but it is only looking for a remedy in 2015. The problem is now. B-Space also states that since the 2000 U.S. Census, Brookline had seen a population increase of 3,000. However, the official census statistics between 2000 and 2010 show only an increase of 1,600 people in the town. Does this mean that since 2010, another 1,500 people have moved into town? Meanwhile, the town has allowed and actively promoted development in North Brookline when the results, even before buildings were built, suggested it would lead to increased school enrollment. Yet, the town invested in these developments and funded low rent. These subsidies should now be redirected toward support for our schools, which are now in deep trouble because of these decisions. Devotion and Pierce neighborhoods have been heavily impacted by these decisions. What townwide strategies have been made to keep up with those changes and their impact on the budget? Number 2, overrides, debt exclusions, and health care costs. Brookline has had 2 overrides and 2 debt exclusion votes in 1990, 1994, 1995, and in 2008. The 1990 debt exclusion for the high school has been paid off. The 1994 override added $2.7 million to the school budget. The 2008 override at $6.3 million added elementary foreign language and 20 minutes to each school day. The Board of Selectmen were the ones who formulated the ballot question and believed that lengthening the school day was as important to the town as repairing streets and preventing service cuts. In 1980, health care was funded by the school budget. Brookline has bought into the GIC statewide health care program and has enjoyed savings from this. Number 3, the formula for funding education. The basic formula among state, local, and federal government funding has remained approximately the same. Budget strategies. If there must be a budget cut, please use equity strategy. Cut equally across the school budget so that all share the limits. Rather than attack one program, it is time to wisely manage the burgeoning school enrollment via funds essential and vital to maintain and sustain the excellence of all Brookline Public School curricular programs. Now the second half of my statements. Past efforts to cut music. In 1980, the decimation of the Brookline music program took decades to repair. At that time, instrumental music teachers with seniority replaced vocal music teachers, even though they had insufficient skills to teach the general music curriculum. Curricula don't just happen.
30 seconds to go, ma'am.
Wow. Teachers must learn the skill sets necessary to implement them. Okay.
Thank you.
Equity. I've got a few more. Equity. Educational reform in America has been influenced and informed by concerns of equity. From the 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education and the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, Brookline has had to deal with issues of equity at every turn. By decimating the music program, all goals toward equity vanish. Only the elite will be able to have music education.
So we're over now.
Okay, can I finish?
Sure. Well, depends how long you take to finish.
I'm passing a lot of things over, which I will give you a copy of.
That's fine.
The music curriculum is vertical and horizontal. I believe our friend over here said it. Cambridge Public Schools are adding music. Why? Because they did a 7-year longitudinal study on a pilot program that had 120 minutes of music in K through 2, actually K through 8. And they found that Title I was no longer necessary.
So grandparent or not, I'm going to ask you to stop now because there are lots of other people that you need to permit to talk. And that's the only reason that I'm interrupting you, as you know.
No problem. Excuse me, but my grandchildren also sent letters of protest, and they will be in your packets.
Great, thanks. So, Anash Nigerian, have I got it right?
Close enough. So folks, I'm striving to really be brief here.
So name and
Yes.
school and address, please.
There we go.
Thank you.
So from my prepared remarks, in fact, I have to read. My name is Anush Nigerian. I am a parent of 2 elementary school kids at Pierce. All right. And basically, I just have a couple of points. I'm a math geek, and here I put on a suit to come talk to you guys, to be respectful to you guys, all right? Okay? All right. As in, I don't know what I'm doing when I'm talking. All right. And I grew up in the Soviet Union, where everything was uniform and tried to be equal-handed and cookie-cutter, and yet we had kind of a similar thing to ECS, right? And that sort of, I guess, for a geek like me, sort of saved me or whatever, you know, like, right? So, I mean, we don't know what the other path would have looked like, but it really, right? At least, right? Okay. So anyway, so that's like my personal window into it. And then, so I kind of, I guess, so naively, just 2 more things. I thought next time I would hear about ECS, honestly, what I would hear about is how we can invest in it, all right? Like, okay. And so I do know, so folks, I have to say, I do know how hard, I don't know how hard you work, but like I can imagine and how much work it really is. So I apologize for any of this that is, you know, somehow in passing disrespect. We do respect you guys, right? And the work you do. And then the other point is, as a math geek, I'm going to say those $200-some thousand, I mean, in my, you know, what I know of balancing budget, that's like such a small number, you know, it just kind of doesn't actually make sense to me that that can really help balance anything. Okay, so this is my, you know, all right. Anyways, thanks a lot. That's all I have.
Thank you. Robert Guillaume, and then I can't read the rest of your name. Sorry. So you can rename yourself and
yes.
Tell us your address.
I'll rename myself.
School.
My name is Robert Gilman. I have 2 daughters, one who's at Pierce School in 5th grade and a 4th grader at Driscoll School. And I really am not prepared to be here. My wife said, just get over and say something, anything, just get there, make it happen. And I'm here to support the music program. When I was first looking for homes around Boston, I was driving down Harvard Street, and there was this ragtag group of parents who had violins and horns, and they're marching down the street. And I said, who are these people doing? And I was told that this is the community who's rallying behind the music program. And I was like, you're kidding me. This is like really what this community does? And the realtor said, yeah, this is what happens here. And I said, this is the community I'm going to belong to. You know, this is the place that I want to be. So, like, you could say that music is something that's easy to sort of discard with, you know, it's sort of an art form, right? But it really reflects the character of the people that we have here and the values that we have and the values of the people who run our community and teach our children and the values that we want to give to our children. And I really feel that this kind of commitment behind the music reflects something that's larger than all the great things that have been said here tonight about you know, how much it gives. It really sort of reflects our character. So, both my girls, they really struggle with music. They have a hard time with it. One of them has dyslexia, and she looks at the notes, and it's just really hard for her to read the notes. So I sit with her at night, and I put her, just tonight, she put her hand on my hand, and I was going and playing a little cello with her. And all of a sudden, you know, this complex passage, it was so complex for her, something clicked, a spark went off. And she looked at me and she said, I get it, I understand what's happening here. And all the things that we talk about, the kind of, the way that music can connect with people was alive right there in my lap just an hour and a half ago. It's something that's really special. What's interesting about music is that it comes from our heart and it comes from our soul. It's something that actually gets breathed out of us. And as soon as people stop paying attention and giving of themselves to this, it goes away, it disappears. It's a very ephemeral thing. And I feel like that's kind of what music is like for this community here. The people that come up here and express themselves so eloquently. And you good public servants who have to come here late at night and listen to this, you know, is the kind of commitment that I have full trust in. And I think that that's the kind of community that I'm proud to be part of.
Thank you. Sam Silverman, I don't know what you want to talk about, but I do know you, so why don't you come up and talk, please.
Hi, my name is Sam Silverman. My wife and I have a daughter at Lincoln School. She's in kindergarten. I want to talk about the changes in the budget to possibly charge for kindergarten next year. So about a year ago, I was actually here. We were talking about the space in schools, and it was a very different conversation with the less people here. And I came up here and I said, we just finished our second year of BEEP, and it was a fantastic experience, and I commended everyone in the public school system for a great job. Now we're halfway through kindergarten, and I am happy to say you guys are still doing a great job. You know, we made a choice. We chose to come here and be in Brookline Public Schools. And you know, we don't regret it. Our one concern when we thought about this way back was, what's the school going to be like 5 or 6 years down the road? I mean, there might be some budget issues. Well, here's one of the next set of budget issues. You know, when you look at people entering schools, and you look at if you're going to start charging for kindergarten, are you going to change the dynamics of who chooses to go to kindergarten, or if they're going to go half day or full day, and the quality of education they're going to get from going half day kindergarten versus full, just like we worry about this with the preschool program. There's some research that has been done about looking at full day versus half day kindergarten, and the economics show that the more kindergarten, the more money you invest in these programs, the better results you get with the kids, and the less problems kids have with learning later on. We all know this. It's, you know, it's what we got to say it. I think we've talked about all the different things, issues of the budget, and we've talked about, you know, do we want to charge? We don't want to charge the kindergarten parents next year, which we won't be, but that doesn't make it fair to them, for other things. At the same time, I'm really looking at the holistic picture of the schools. What's the budget issue going to be next year, right? Because, I mean, this is not a problem that seems to be going away. It's going to be recurring. So I think there's a systemic problem, and we really got to think about it as a whole. And if we keep looking at this, you know, what can we get by this year or next year, it's really going to eat into the basic qualities of some of the things that certainly people here brought to the table that are possibly at risk, and you know, it's just going to grow. So I think, you know, everything I heard tonight, I support. I think the programs here are great, and I want the same opportunities that people before me have had for my child in these great programs, and not have to worry about it. Because if it gets worse, people might make the other choices, and I don't want to see that. We have great diversity here. I mean, that was a big part of why we came here, and I don't want that diversity to change. And I think a lot of people in the school system feel the same way. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Joyce Wong, you want to talk about ECS? Oh, and music. A twofer.
Thank you for the opportunity. So I am Joyce Wong. I'm a parent at Baker. I have two children in 4th and 7th grade. And so also to provide you some context, I'm a professor at Boston University in biomedical engineering, so I see definitely I teach freshmen also all the way through graduate students and postdocs in my lab, and so I also have a very strong interest in outreach and trying to encourage more students to be in STEM, as you know, is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And what I just, so another area that I've actually gotten into recently, which has been really fun because I'm also a musician, is that I've been incorporating music and art. I'm collaborating with musicians and composers in trying to incorporate that in to excite children and students into science, because as we know, so the reason why I want to talk about ECS and music and all of the arts is because we know they're really, really intertwined and really connected to each other. They go hand in hand. They're, everyone talks about music as a universal language. We've seen countless examples throughout the world where people bring music into different countries and how it has a huge impact on how people learn. Other people have said it much more eloquently than me, how you can actually see increases in learning. There's a connection between music and math. I could go on, and physics and everything. And the other point people have said already is the ECS really reaches all students. I can't imagine, so I've been lucky. Sue Pelagian is at Baker School, so my children have really benefited from her. I'll never forget the Baker Breaking News, where my daughter, she for the first time was interviewing our neighbor who happened to be an Olympic speed skater, and so just having that and having her name and the byline and actually doing the interview, that was fantastic. So I think there's so many different ways for students to express themselves. I think someone mentioned that the extra pressure that's going to be on the library resources, which by the way have been cut already, and I know that because I'm one of the many Baker parents that volunteers in shelving. I know it sounds boring, but it's actually very satisfying. Shelving, I like doing that, Okay, so, but the other point I think is that the arts is a way to allow expression for everyone, and I don't mean just music. We heard great examples, but also, the arts and also drama, and I know I am probably not alone in the room here where I see my children are constantly online and on computer technology. My goodness, I'm on all the time. And I think that this is really one of the rare opportunities where you have an instrument in your hand or you're making something. People know that we can learn not just from reading in a textbook, but we learn visually, we learn from auditory, we learn kinesthetically. So I think it's really important that we don't lose this. And the other point, I think it's really important, I think Mary Epstein said it very beautifully, and I didn't know this history, and I would love to hear more, so I was hoping you could speak longer. I think, I've been fortunate, John Ferguson and Emily Stewart, are the people I know the most at Baker School. They've built an amazing music program, and I echo absolutely that if we decimate that, it's extremely difficult to build that up again, and I think that it's just sad. I'm just disheartened when I see that. I myself went to public school, in Michigan, but anyway, so I think the last point I want to make is that I think, at the end of the day, I'm really fortunate. I have the resources, and I can I send my kids to Russian School of Math. Maybe some of you do here too. And, I have the resources to do that. I have my students in private lessons and things, and I can help them too. But not everybody has that. And the whole point, I think, is that it's really equal opportunity for all students. And so I think you then begin to have this disparity between people who have the opportunity and people who don't. And if you have that growing, my goodness, we're seeing that already in our country. And I think it's really dangerous to go down that road where especially in a public school, the point is that everybody has equal opportunity. So I think that's really the danger is the disparity. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Graham Grant, you want to talk about a long-term plan?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, Graham Grant. I have 3 kids at Pierce. I'll have 4 next year. So I was calling. I wanted to talk. I arrived. Just wanted to hear what the discussion was about. I'm really disappointed in this discussion. I feel like that we're even having it is wrong. And what I mean by that is we're talking about the 2014 budget, and if this is a question of ups and downs, sometimes revenue is a little low, high, whatever, and we tweak around it just fine. But what I'm hearing is we have a structural problem. There are more kids, and it's getting worse. And we're talking about 1-year plan. Why are we not discussing a 5-year plan? Like, why is there not something structural about that? I think it's a shame that we don't have this in front of us. It's really embarrassing. Like, this is a long-term structural problem. Talking about fundraising for a couple of months is ridiculous. And I'm just really surprised at the level of conversation that I'm not hearing. I'm not hearing from you guys. What is our real plan? How are we handling it structurally? Because the schools are vital for the town. And there doesn't seem to be any plan about something that is foreseen and is coming and is getting worse. And we're talking about a 1-year budget. So I don't know how to make choices in a 1-year budget with no plan around where we're going and how we're going to handle it. That's my point.
Thank you. Joshua Abrams.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this long night. And considering all of these comments, my name is Joshua Abrams, and I'm a Pierce parent and a Brookline High parent. I have a 4th grader at Pierce and a 9th grader at Brookline High who was at Pierce for 9 years. Both of them obviously have participated in the wonderful music program at Pierce and have benefited a huge amount from that program. They've also been involved in the theater program at Pierce, which is largely parent-run, and I had the pleasure this year of working to help put that together with the help of many Pierce parents who put in endless hours, and it really strikes me hearing about this proposal and thinking back to my years when I was in elementary school and the amount of internal school support there was for theater, for all kinds of music programs that we just don't see anymore. And it's really quite terrifying for me to think that we're heading down that road now with the music programs that we do have, even in an even worse way, that we would now be in a situation where we would have even less support for music than we have now. It's already something where parents are, at least at Pierce, and I know at many of the other schools, picking up a lot of the slack for what's not there, and supporting, we hope, the music program, the wonderful music education that's going on in the schools. And it would be tragic if we lost that, and I just wanted to add my voice to the many voices here today that have been vociferously stating that this would be devastating to our schools. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So this is a name problem for me. Cohen, K-O-E-N. And maybe you can help me with your last name, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I also have bad handwriting. My name is Koen Reijering. I'm the dad of a 2nd grader at Pierce who loves music. And my daughter will enroll in kindergarten next year. Although I hope she can skip it using the ECL program. Actually, we just moved to Brookline this summer. We moved to the US, so I'm not sure if I should even be here. On the other hand, because I'm a guest and we'll be leaving again.
You're as welcome as anybody else is here, sir.
I guess I might represent quite a fair number of parents in the Brookline school community who are maybe here but who are mostly not here. And that's my first point of criticism. notice you're all very polite, but I just like to be clear, if that's okay. So the communication should be, or could be so much better. I think most of the foreign parents don't even know this is going on. And I got an email yesterday about this. Second point I want to make is that coming from abroad, I can compare the level of education. Well, in my opinion, I'm not impressed by what I see here, although everybody's trying really hard, and the teachers and the staff at Pierce are really, really nice. So actually, I want to make a comment about the kindergarten charge, because I think one of the problems is that people or children already go to school at quite a high age. And when you put pressure on parents, and it may even be $1,000, but for some people I guess that's a lot of money, to postpone that moment even further, I think that will even worsen the situation. So you may be talking about building a bridge, but if you cause damage before, and there's not much building to do. That was the point I wanted to make. Thanks.
Thank you. Bob Miller.
Hi, how are you? My name's Bob Miller, and I'm actually a teacher at Heath School for the last 10 years, but 17 years ago I became a Brookline parent. My children went to devotion, starting with preschool and then through Brookline High School, and I'm proud to say that Brookline did an amazing job of educating my children, and they're both successfully in college, which is quite the economic challenge, but I'm proud of them. And I wasn't planning to speak, but first of all, I want to say that having been, as you might have gathered, even 17 years ago is not when I first graduated from college myself. I came from another career, and I want to say to the school committee that I really appreciate the fact that I don't think that there's any other, certainly in the private sector, you do not have a demand increase and a budget decrease. And it's a pretty, coming from the private sector, it's a pretty dysfunctional situation to expect to do more for more people and do it with less money and keep the quality up. So I can really acknowledge and appreciate the challenge. I wasn't planning to speak, but the reason that I wanted to get up is, first of all, I really appreciate and have been impressed with the comments about ECS, about the comments regarding the music program, the kindergarten program. But the reason that I wanted to get up is that I felt it was really important to say that what struck me is the passion in the community about the schools and the quality of the schools. And I want to speak for programs that aren't being challenged right now, because I think that were it some other program, we would have the same response. And I know that I'm working really hard with my efforts to encourage the state government to put the priority on education, and I hope that my neighbors are, and I talk to my friends and neighbors about that. And basically I just wanted to say that, you know, Brookline is an amazing community, and it's amazing in its support for education, and you know, ask the community to help solve this, because I don't think that there's many people in Brookline that won't do whatever it takes to try and make this continue to be the amazing school system that it is. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. So that's all the people who signed up to comment. Yes, ma'am?
I did. I signed up to comment.
I'm sorry. Did I miss you? You're absolutely right. I see you. Anadi, and I can't pronounce your last name either. I apologize for that. Go right ahead.
Hello, I'm Anandi Sivakumar. I'm a Rankle parent. I'm a parent of 4 kids, a 3rd grader, a kindergartner, and 2 twins in the Beep who are going to kindergarten next year. And I'm here to talk about the kindergarten fees. And having 2 kids in kindergarten already, I know the importance of having a full year kindergarten. So we are going to pay up. So we have our $2,000 there already. It's done. And I'm also not here to come and ask, why are you going to charge that, or try to talk to, like, to have you not charge that fees, because I know that it's not going to work. This fees is here to stay, and it's going to keep increasing year after year after year. But what I would hope to see for that fee would be smaller classrooms. Is that something that the school committee could promise us, that going forward that we would have smaller classrooms and music lessons for the K-3? Because it would be really a shame when we really do pay up the money, and all of us would. I don't think that there would be any parent who would opt out of the $1,000. We would pay that gladly and even more. But I just wish it would have been told to us before the registration and not after the registration. It's kind of a surprise for us.
Right.
Had you told us before the plan, I'm sure a lot of parents, especially parents who have had kids gone to the Beep, would have signed up for even more. And I'm sure the school committee knows that too. And going forward, I think you need to have a special discussion with the kindergartners, not only the ones who are coming in 2013, but also the 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, all those kids who are going to high school and face those same problems that everyone here are discussing. Those are the kids who are going to be affected by what's going to happen. So I think you should involve those parents more actively in your discussion, and also find ways to raise more money. And I don't think it's really fair to have only the kindergartners pay. And again, I emphasize that I'm sure all the parents would be willing to pay something. I'm just sure the town should find a way to make that happen. And in future, if you have anything that you're going to have people pay, it would be nice that if you put it before the registration starts. And because when we went to register, we all thought that we are going to finally have our whole life back, and our kids are going back to school. And that's what I thought. I had a kid in 2004, 2006, and 2008, and I hadn't had a break. So 2013, the day after Labor Day, was supposed to be my Freedom Day. Okay? That was my day of freedom. But now I have to pay $2,000 for my freedom. And believe me, that's nothing. That's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. I would pay much more for that. I just wish I knew much earlier about that. And the other concern is my twins are on IEP, and the IEPs have designed with a full day in mind. So if you are going to cut the day in half, the entire program, the time is going to go off in all the different services they get. So what are they going to have? Are they going to get to go to the library? I'm sure the music is already down to one half, so you already have some time over there. What else is going to be cut from them? Are they even going to have an experience of a proper kindergarten? And then what about the rest half of the day that we choose to send the kids for a full day? What are they going to do for the second half of the thing? We don't have a plan for that. So I think you need to have a special meeting and discuss something. And if you're going to charge for that, I think those kindergartners need something special. And definitely music should not be chopped up for them. It's a shame. And it's also, I don't mean to be disrespectful for all the parents out here, but there are only very few parents have come and spoken about kindergarten fees. And it's mostly the parents who have kindergartners going next year. And I'm very sure, most of the kindergartners coming in next year don't even know about this. They don't even know about it. I came to know about it only because For all the messages I've got from the school or from Dr. Lupini, I never even opened this. For some reason, I just decided to open this, and I saw what? $1,000 for kindergarten.
This was the one.
This is the one I really decided to open it. It was crazy. I never open anything because it's a waste of time. And then I did this. No, you know, really.
30 seconds to go, ma'am.
Parents have a life
Taking
too.
you off the snow day list.
We have another person who wishes to comment, and that's Amy Grayson.
I'm also on the list, and you don't call my name.
I'm sorry. You,
No, that's okay. You can go.
well, that's okay. We'll let you go after.
Well, she's a tough act to follow, so just going to bring it a little less crazy. My name's Amy Grayson. I'm the parent of a first grader at Driscoll, and I wanted to thank the school committee members and Superintendent Lupini, all the other Brookline School District staff and parents who have engaged in this very difficult ongoing discussion about the budget for next year. My son started reading at 3 and a half, and he could tell time at age 3, and he could do fractions at age 5 before he started kindergarten. And he's not really an outlier in his class. He has a whole cohort of students in his class who are right there with him. So I think maybe a separate topic to be proposed to the committee might be to review the curriculum and see where it can be made more challenging. Miss Ellen Davidson is the Driscoll ECS teacher, and she comes to my son's classroom every week to conduct small group projects and also to co-teach whole class projects. We're also incredibly fortunate that our son's teacher was a graduate student of Miss Davidson, so she's well versed in differentiating the curriculum, providing opportunities for our son to be challenged in his classroom. Last year in kindergarten, the ECS program was largely absent from his day, and it was a challenge for me and for his teacher to negotiate a path for him that we both felt comfortable with. It was not easy, and I finished the school year feeling quite dissatisfied, to be honest. I'm very worried that if the ECS program will be eliminated, there will be hundreds of parents trying to navigate a no man's land between subject or grade acceleration for their students and their students being bored in the classroom with the grade level curriculum. So many parents in this Brookline address this gap between the classroom expectations and their student capabilities by supplementing their students' education with activities like Russian math, Khan Academy, and IXL. And although this is one approach to supporting our students, I would much prefer for my child to be engaged in learning during the whole 6.5 hours he is at school every day. As an earlier speaker pointed out, our children spend most of their time at school and on homework. And I want my son to be engaged during all that time, not just after school when we can fit in the icing on the cake for the extra learning. Maintaining the ECS program in the schools is critical for providing classroom support for teachers, not just for the advanced learners, but for the whole class. Even small group pullouts help the teachers by reducing their load in the classroom. And there's also teacher coaching behind the scenes. As my son's teacher said, she said, me and Ellen go way back, so they have a good rapport and they work together all the time. So the impact of eliminating that program will be felt not just on the students at the higher end of the curve, but the whole class and the teachers as well. As we know, we heard once the music program was cut back in the 80s, it took a long time to restore that program and to build it back up. So I think that perhaps to bridge the upcoming year, other sources of funding have been proposed to maintain the ECS presence in the schools. Maybe there are other options like reaching out to the area universities who do K-12 STEM outreach, or something like Johns Hopkins Center for Academically Talented Youth. Maybe there are other sources of funding that could be secured to bridge the year. But as Graham Grant mentioned, a long-term plan also needs to be put in place. The enrollment numbers are going up and the funding is going down. It's not a surprise. So this is an ongoing problem, and addressing next year is just next year. But there's going to be the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. Brookline is very lucky to have so many intelligent and well-educated families. We have Longwood doctors, we have MIT and Harvard professors, we have BU professors and Simmons. I mean, it's incredible. It's also one of the few towns in the Boston metro area with an enrichment program in the public school district. That's amazing. And Massachusetts is ranked #1 in the country for the quality of their public school systems. So to me, this means that if any town in the country has the raw material of academic excellence, it's Brookline. We should be shaping and honing that raw material and supporting all of our students to excel and achieve their best. We have all the ingredients here to support a culture of intellectual excellence and learning. If we take pride in our scholars who are accepted at universities, who win scholarships, who study abroad, and do so many other amazing things, we need to continue to provide them with a solid foundation of academic excellence, work ethic, and a love of learning. The ECS program is just one component of that foundation, but it's a crucial one. When my son finishes homework in 5 minutes, and his teacher said we don't do homework extensions, how is he learning a work ethic? He's not. So I understand the budget situation is extremely difficult, and again, I thank the school committee for working hard to come up with some creative solutions. As many of us know, ECS in reality has had a cut over the past few years because of the level funding and the enrollment increase. It's been more than 50% at Driscoll. So ECS serves a core essential need and really needs to be prioritized as such. So in conclusion, I respectfully ask the school committee members to support a budget solution that will restore the ECS program in its entirety for the fiscal year 2014. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Johnson, you said may or may not want to speak, so I'm glad you spoke up.
I'm just going to speak for like a minute because everyone else has said it all. But I just want to reiterate the fact that all these things are really important. It's clear to me that everyone thinks all these things are important, and it's not clear to me that you don't think the same thing. So I think that the issue, though, is funding it, and we have to find some other solutions because I don't think the solution of paying for kindergarten is the correct solution, and I don't think the solution, as other people have said, is having it pinpointed on just ECS or just music. Or it's like, this is the budget, these are the costs we want in our budget, this is what we want to present. We are short, we need to find a funding solution for all these programs. And then the other thing, which I know is impossible to do, but it like bugs me, is I was thinking Graham when he got up there and said we need a long-term thing, and Dr. Lipini has been saying, this is a short gap proposal for just this year until we can get our hands around it, and it's like, I'm afraid to say it, but we're doing like a landscape thing in our the playground near where I live, and we're going to spend $800,000 on it, and it's okay right now. It could go on another couple years. And if this is a one-year spending thing, and so I guess my point is, I'm not trying to take money away from our playground. Don't anyone yell at me. But my point is that is there something that the town can do if this is like a one-year thing because we're too short of time to figure this out right and to be smart about it. And we need the time to think it out and do it right. And so is there something that the town can do for this one-time thing to find a way to loan the school the money or do something? Let us get through this year and come up with some real solutions to the funding of the things that we all want.
Thank you. So I just want to say a couple of words. I want to thank everybody so much for your taking the time and making the effort to share your thoughts with us. As you all know, particularly in Brookline, community input is essential to our process. And no community, as you can see, does it better than Brookline. And frankly, it's an enormous strength for our form of democracy. No question about it. Virtually all of you have acknowledged the difficult budget choices we have to make. During our superintendent's time here, this year is, as he said, this year is far and away the most difficult. Whether or not we will face equally or even more difficult budget decisions in the future is anyone's guess. In any case, it is not out of the question that we'll have to face this again. You may be able to determine that in the not too distant future, and Mr. Grant talked about a long-term plan, and Ms. Johnson was alluding to the same thing. And, you know, one long-term plan is not well received by all people, but it is an override. And I guess I'm allowed to say that at this point. And it's not that we're not aware of that. It takes quite a while to do effectively, because you all should know that about 17% of the households in Brookline have kids in our school system. And we have to convince a lot more than 17% of our citizens to support this kind of thing. It's late. Much of value has been said. And I don't think an extended discussion by the school committee is possible now, but and also because there are a couple of our committee members who couldn't attend tonight. So, but I would like to offer each school committee person an opportunity to make a comment if they'd like at this point. And I guess I have to hold you to the same 5 minutes that I've been holding everybody else. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. And you don't have to make a comment. Some of you may choose not to, but I just wanted to offer you that opportunity if you would. Anyone wish to?
I don't actually want to make a comment about everything that we've heard. It's been an incredibly rich discussion, and I want to thank you on behalf of the committee. I mean, you've already been thanked, but thank you all for coming out. Thank you for all of the emails. It's incredibly helpful to us to hear from you, and you should encourage your friends and neighbors to send us an email if they haven't already. Forgive me, Mr. Morse and Dr. Lupini, you have to respond to all of them. But mostly I just wanted to say that, that as a member of the board, what I would really like is the opportunity to have more discussion as a result of all of these comments and also some of the things that we've been talking about. And so in lieu of having us make comments, I would rather just do that.
That certainly is the plan. Anyone else? Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. If there's no other business, we will adjourn.